pain, I can't take it. I'm staying grounded and grateful, cause I know everything that I've been through only made me count my blessings daily. Yeah, they been acting shady, but I don't take it personal. The memories fading, I'm enjoying the moment. I've been smelling the roses, taking time to reflect, stepping back, the truth unfolding, unfolding. Got nothing to prove, cause I'm about to blow. I've been in the booth, speaking to my soul. You know that I'm true, either way it go, either way it goes. I cannot turn cold, staying on the low. I've been protecting my soul. If your intentions are not pure, I can't let you get too close, cause I'm vibrating high. Ain't got time for your ego, these niggas quit to turn their back. Acting like the amigos, he never cared in the shows. Wasn't with you at your lows, assuming that you gonna fold. But baby, I've been growing ever since I let you go. And I've been doing better, and I know that hurts to know. Hurts to know. Only good vibes around me, and that's for sure. Only good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes. Can't lie. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes.
What was a fucking searching
for my inner peace?
pedophile, sympathizing, fucking terrorist.
To the surface was hurting, but I had to heal, releasing all the pain that I always held. Been going through some changes, I'll make it still. Protecting my soul to keep it real. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes. Can't lie. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes.
It was our job to help law enforcement.
Obsessed, junkie, stuff. They are the most fucking unhinged creatures on earth. Fuck you, fuck you.
It's not productive, it's kind of gross and icky, and I feel like it tells us more about them than the people they're trying to degrade. They're always trying to degrade someone.
Bruh. What's up, everyone? Hey, everybody. Welcome. Hey, happy Friday. Welcome all. Hey, I see everyone in here. Quad Axel, Emily, Matt Payton, Silence Woman, Adrian, Christina, Georgina Taylor. Welcome. Who we got in here? Defies Logic, Fur Baby Daddy, Who's Her Daddy, Sergeant Mike. What's up, sir? Untamable. Wow. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Good to see everybody. I'm trying to catch up with this chat and just make sure I say hi to everybody. Christopher, uh, Moonbeam 70s child, what's up? Good to see everybody. All right. Rebecca Ann, hey, what's up, Rebecca? Everybody go subscribe to her channel and all our fucking chat members. Come on, go subscribe to their channels. You know, Adrian's channel. Yeah, you got Christina's channel, Rebecca's channel. Shoot, who else is in here with channels? Go subscribe to their channels, everybody. I truly appreciate everyone for being here. Hey, tonight is Friday night. Welcome to your Friday night show. All right. So I'm glad to see everybody. Tonight's show is called DELPHI, the GITMO treatment of Richard Allen, also subtitled The Alleged Confessions of a U.S. Veteran Who Was Coerced by Torture. Okay, and that's the title of our show tonight. And hey, trigger warning. Okay, trigger warning. For anyone coming in to watch, if you have a weak constitution, tonight is not the night. So you might want to skip this one because tonight is going to be a little tough. Okay, tonight's going to be a little tough. It's not really the best for you to sit here and listen to this show if you're kind of weak. So this is going to be a tough one. Tonight's going to be our part 2 of the appellate issues in the case of Richard Allen that we are going to be addressing in this 3-part series. And this is episode number 2. And tonight we're taking care of the most appalling part of this all, which was Richard Allen's treatment in Westville and the coercion or the extraction or the torturing of confessions out of him or confession-like statements. So that's what it's going to be about tonight. And it's not an easy one to get through, but we'll be getting through it. And I have a lot put together for you all. So please do try to hear it all. If you're at all interested in the truth about what happened here in the Delphi murders trial against Richard Allen, tonight is probably the show that you want to listen to, because it's very important that you understand what happened here so that you can go out and discuss publicly when you're out discussing with something behind what you're saying, okay? But tonight's show is our Friday night show. And hey, we're all facing a winter storm, right? So as we speak now, I'm currently having a heavy snowfall. Okay, heavy snowfall. Spent the day preparing for the snowfall. We're going to have a couple days of heavy snowfall, blizzard-like conditions, far below freezing temperatures. And I know that goes for most of the country east of the Rockies, including the Rockies. So that's what we're dealing with. And so hopefully all of you are prepared for the weather. And those of you on the replay, you're probably still going to be getting this weather over the course of the weekend. So, you know, I kind of believe that therefore you have the time and the solitude and comfort to be able to take in this hard to swallow information or this hard to digest information. So I suggest if you're able to stomach it, stick around for what you're going to hear, okay? Because this is very important, what you're going to hear tonight. And then, of course, we will be following up with our final installment, part 3, in the next time we get together for a live stream, which will be early next week. So anyway, I want to thank everyone in the chat for coming in. And if you're on the replay, hey, leave comments down below. We love to hear from you. And that's the truth. So please do. I want to say hello to those who are just coming in. Like I think Critter Mama just might have come in. Regina Grady Bolden, Marlo 2420. Yeah, so everyone who's just coming into the live, welcome on into the live. Swade Smith, hey, good to see you. And, like I said, on the replay, leave the comments down below and I'll talk to you in the comments and we'll get along together that way. Okay, so just a moment here. All right. So, before we get into tonight's show too deeply, I want to make sure that I share with you some relevant and breaking news, okay, especially for you residents of Indiana or anyone who's really paying attention to what's going on in the news. So we're going to kick things off that way. And I don't really have much to say about it, but I want to send you this update. So let's get into this update and then we'll be right back.
A News 10 follow-up. 5 people are behind bars at this hour for their alleged role in the shooting of Tippecanoe Superior Court 2 Judge Steve Meyer and his wife Kimberly. All day today, our sister station in Lafayette has been combing through several court documents. Rachel Hawk explains what she's learned.
These are the 5 faces arrested Thursday for the shooting of Judge Stephen Meyer and his wife Kimberly at their Lafayette home, each of them having a hand in the way that day played out. Let's rewind to January 18th. At approximately 2:14 p.m., officers dispatched Mill Pond Lane for reports of shooting. Officers say a male was on the front porch claiming to be looking for his dog. Meyer said they did not have his dog. Shots fired from a black short-barreled shotgun. Police later say the serial number and model were obliterated. Judge Meyer and his wife were both inside the home at the time, both receiving injuries from the gunshots. Officers gave medical aid until Judge Meyer was taken to a level 1 trauma hospital. Officers noticed a vehicle parked suspiciously behind trees near the home, a Hyundai Kona with a stolen license plate. Surveillance footage on the Myers front doorstep shows a male in a black and gray hooded flannel, a gray scarf, gray earmuffs, black sunglasses, a white face mask depicting a white male face, and the hood pulled over his head. That suspect, now identified as Raylan Ferguson of Lexington, Kentucky. We rewind back to January 16th, that same distinct knock on the door by an individual with the same description and outfit as Ferguson on the 18th. That individual, now identified as Ferguson, claimed to be a food delivery driver with an order. The Myers responding saying they have the wrong house. One suspect, Thomas Gregory Moss, was set to go to trial before Judge Meyer just 2 days after the shooting happened. Moss, a habitual offender, has a record of felony charges, domestic battery cases, and more. The case before Judge Meyer was regarding domestic battery that he was later served a no-contact order for in 2024. Now, how did police piece it together? The victim in Moss's case saw the news and alerted police that back on January 12th, an individual with a mask knocked on her front door in Pennsylvania. Her surveillance footage shows the same mask Ferguson was wearing at the Myers home later on the 18th. Amanda Millsap, Thomas Moss's ex-wife, had attempted to bribe the victim with $10,000 not to testify in Moss's case. Social media tied Zenaida Greer, Raylan Ferguson, Blake Smith, and Thomas Moss together. Greer and Ferguson also lived together in Lexington. The Phantom Motorcycle Club 1%, a gang...
Hello. Sorry. I meant to pause it right at that moment. Let's back this up for the slow folks in the room who sit in the back. Let's see. Let's try that again.
1% again.
There you go. Hello. Can I have a round of applause for the smart people in the room? What does this mean here? Have we seen this before on my channel? Okay, sorry for rubbing it in, but yeah, let me back that up 3 seconds to let you listen closely to this part here.
Okay. The Phantom Motorcycle Club 1.
The what? The Phantom Motorcycle Club 1%er group.
Motorcycle Club 1%, a gang tying together in Lexington. The Phantom Motorcycle Club 1%, a gang tying Smith and Moss together, and the Vice Lords tying Moss and Ferguson.
The Vice Lords. The Phantom Motorcycle Club 1%ers, okay?
Together. The next step in the timeline, the very court Moss was attempting to avoid. In Lafayette, I'm Rachel Hawk.
Why is it that Lafayette seems to be the center of a whole bunch of bad shit? in the state of Indiana and in the Midwest in general. Have you seen the disproportionate amount of bullshit that goes on down in the Lafayette region? Yeah. So that's update number one. Now we have update number two. Please allow me a moment to accomplish this for you. All right, here we go. Let's see. Let's see if I can do this appropriately. Let's see. I'm gonna move this over. All right, and then we gotta pull this. Now I got a little something else for you here. And look, there's two things tonight which I owe to two special individuals who have assisted me. So they shall remain unnamed. Okay, but this next thing is very concerning as well. Now you guys might remember. Let me do this for you. Let's see. Again, I'm just trying to get into some news updates before we go too much further into the show. Okay, so you might remember this here. Let's see if I can manage. That's not it. But I guess since this one popped up, notice the bloodlusters. Okay, you notice the bloodlusters sharing this. Christina Gull seeks to replace Allen County Judge, mother Fran Gull, right? Remember Christina Gull, who we just learned about? And I was attempting to grab this other image, and just in the rush, I grabbed the wrong one. So let me grab this one. Yeah, good thing it wasn't for my private stash, right? Okay, let's see what else I got here. I have the better photo of her that I meant to pull, which was this one. Okay. This one. Okay, but you know I document the bloodlusters on an ongoing basis, so apologize for that. This one here, Christina Gull seeks to replace Mother Fran Gull as Allen County Judge. Okay, this is another update I want to provide to you, and thanks to my special friend who assisted me with this one. Let me do a little thing right here. There's something we discovered, okay, and I just want to bring this to your attention really quickly. I found a little something odd, okay, which is this right here. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to look, as you can see, I went into My Case Indiana, okay. I went into My Case Indiana and I did something simple, okay. I went into My Case Indiana, I did something simple. As you can see here, all I did was type in Christina Gull, okay, Christina Gull, attorney search, Christina Gull. Now I'd like you to look at something here. And this is also in our news updates for the week. Take a look at here, Christina Gull. Okay, I'd like you to just take a look. Okay, child molesting. Okay, child molesting. There we go. Sexual battery. Person under 14, domestic battery, neglect. Neglect of dependent. Serious bodily injury, person under 14. Look at here, sexual battery, rape, okay, criminal confinement, child solicitation, dissemination of harmful material to minors. Here's another one, rape, compelled by force or imminent threat of force, domestic battery, person under 14, neglect of dependent, resulting in bodily injury. Here's another one, possession of child pornography, aggravating factor. Here's another one, rape, child molestation with threat of force of deadly weapon, okay? Here's another one, child solicitation, okay? Here's another one, neglect of dependent, okay? Here's another one, neglect of dependent. Here's another one, rape when victim has verbally or refused otherwise sexual conduct or misconduct with a minor. Here's another one, sexual conduct in the presence of a minor, dissemination of matter harmful to minors. Here's another one, child molestation. Okay, here's another one, child molesting under 14. Here's another one, child molesting fondling under 14. Here's another one, neglect under 14, confinement under 14, okay? False information, okay? Here's another one, domestic battery under 14, battery of a person under 14, okay? We're going on to page 2, okay? Here's page 2, rape, okay? Other sexual conduct, sexual misconduct with minor, okay? Here's another one, rape, okay? Here's another one, child molesting under 14. Here's another one, child molesting under 14, rape, child is unaware of defendant's actions. Here's another one, battery under 14. Here's another one, rape when victim is unaware. Here's another one, child molesting under 21, child molesting under 14. Here's another one, rape. Here's another one, neglect of a dependent. Okay, that endangers, delinquency of a minor, dissemination of matter harmful to minors, distribution of an intimate image. Here's another one, possession of child pornography, aggravating factor. Here's another one, rape with deadly force, deadly weapon. Here's another one, child exploitation, managed to produce, sponsor, present, exhibit, photo, film, etc. Possession of child pornography, pornography, aggravating factor, inappropriate communication. Here's another one, rape when victim is mentally disabled, other. Just keep in mind, all of these you're seeing, sexual battery, sexual conduct. This is what you get from merely putting in the name of Christina Gull in the attorney search bar of My Case Indiana. Child molesting, fondling, performing sexual conduct in the presence of a minor under 18. Here's another one, murder, firearm used. We're just on page 2. Here's page 3, okay? Possession of child pornography, aggravating factor, et cetera, et cetera. Here's another one, neglect of a dependent, under 14, resulting battery, under 14, neglect of a dependent. Here's another one, neglect of a dependent, sexual battery, okay, confinement. Here's another one, possession of child pornography, multiple counts. Here's another one, murder again. Here's child molesting, rape when victim is mentally disturbed or deficient, other, molesting, fondling, or touching child under 14, sexual conduct in the presence of a minor, child solicitation, okay, dissemination of matter harmful to minors, sexual conduct in the presence of a minor, child molesting, sexual conduct in the presence of a minor, touch, fondle, indecency. Here's another one, rape, imminent threat of force, child molesting. Here's another one, possession of child pornography, child molesting under 14, sexual misconduct with a minor, child molesting, fondling or touching under 14. Another one, under 14, dissemination of matter harmful to minors. Here's another one, domestic battery, person under 14, neglect of dependent. Okay, here's another one, rape when compelled by force, threat of imminent force, possession of a firearm by serious violent felon, a confinement while armed with a deadly weapon. They were going on to page 5 or 4. Who knows? I've lost track now. You know, public indecency, dissemination of matter harmful to minors, child solicitation, under 14. Okay, solicitation for sexual conduct, dissemination of matter harmful, child molest. Okay, child molest, fondling, touching under 14, child molest 21. Where defendant is at least 21 years of age, but victim is less than 16, child molest, okay? Here's another one, child molest, 21 years of age, defendant, child under 14, sexual misconduct with a minor, child seduction, guardian, a parent, adoptive parent, child seduction, okay? Child sexual battery, criminal confinement, sexual misconduct with a minor, has intercourse, okay? Child molestation, under 14, here's another one, child pornography. Here's another one, sexual misconduct, rape, criminal confinement, possession of child pornography, child molest, possession of child pornography, child molest. Here's another one, child pornography. Here's another one, murder with firearm. Here's another one, sexual conduct, presence of minor, neglect of dependent. Here's another one, sexual battery, criminal confinement, failure to register as a sex offender or violent sex offender. Here's page number 5. Failure to register as a offender and violent offender, battery, sexual battery, residential break and entry, failure to register as a sex or violent offender, another failure to register, illegal sex offender residency within 1,000 foot of school, sex offender. Here's another one, child molest, where defendant is 21 and child under 14. Here's another one, failure to register. Here's another one, possession of firearm, domestic battery, criminal reckless. Here's another one, failure to register, failure to register, failure to register, failure to register. Here's another one, intimidation. Here's another one, intimidation, sexual battery, domestic battery, deadly weapon, child molest, where defendant is 21, child under 14. And so I think I've made my point. Okay, it goes on and on and on. It goes on and on and on. So I think what you guys need to understand, the point we're trying to make here is, what does Christina Gull do? Where is she coming from? What's going on in Allen County? And why is her record here, in my case, almost exclusively crimes against children? Now, I think all of you can do the same that I've just done, which is you can go to Indiana, my case, you can put in Christina Gull into the attorney slot, and you can go and start to dig into this. But I think this is a huge red flag that's being thrown up, and I think that this has a lot of implications. Okay, this has a lot of implications for a lot of things, as I've said before. Now, think about this. Attorneys who consistently work the meth game, okay? What do they know about more than almost anyone else in the state? They know about the meth game, right? Right? You would assume. And likewise, attorneys who strictly work child molest, rape, and child exploitation, child pornography cases, what are they going to know about almost more than anyone in the state? Okay, so because the topics of the week tend to be the shooting of this judge in Lafayette and his wife, and the announcement of the retirement of Fran Gull, and the attempt by her daughter, Christina Gull, to step into her position, I think is very pertinent that all of you guys know what's actually going on. Okay, you got to know what's going on. And so I want to thank my partner who sent me the tip that we need to be looking into Christina Gull, because I think that that's a very interesting thing. Okay, a very interesting thing. For instance, you guys know that there are two individuals, one in the Flora case who's the lead, and one in the Delphi case who was the lead, that both of those individuals came from the meth unit of the Indiana State Police, heads of the meth unit for the Indiana State Police. So both of the leads over Flora and Delphi emanate from the meth unit of the Indiana State Police, which means they're going to know everything about the meth game in Indiana. Okay, because they are the ones who work with CIs. They are the ones who work with all of the networks of cops, the dealers. They're going to know everything on the street, right? So you better bet your sweet ass that Christina Gull knows everything about the pedos in Indiana. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So we need to be thinking about that, because you know my theory is that this Delphi crime is the intersection of the meth game and the child trafficking or child exploitation network. Okay, I think we're dealing with the 1%er gangs who are enforcing for the pedophiles and the meth traffickers. So that's where I think the intersection lies in Delphi. And so the fact that not only do we have the former head of the meth unit for the Indiana State Police leading this investigation the past many years, the entire time, but now we know we have Judge Gull and her daughter would clearly have communicated. They're going to be very, very apt in understanding the pedophile networks, the child trafficking networks, the CSAM, and all the like that's going down in Indiana. So I think it's very important that all of you have your finger on the pulse of this. So I wanted to show you both of those things. I wanted to show you the two updates of the important news this week so that you can go follow up on it. So yeah, go to my case, type in Christina Gull, and go see what you can find. And you'll find that it's page after page after page after page after page after page. And it's all the same. So very interesting. Okay, very interesting. Now, tonight's topic. The GITMO treatment of Richard Allen. We're going to dive head in. We're going to dive head on in. And I want to thank everyone who's coming in late. Good to see you. Okay, come on in. Thank you very much for the support and for coming on in. Like I said, this is going to be a very intense show. Okay, so I guess sit back, get ready. This is going to be something else. Okay, so we're going to dive on head in. And so I told you last time we covered all of Judge Gull's erroneous decisions on the case. Okay, that was our last episode that we covered, which was all of Judge Gull's appellate issues. Now we're going to look tonight at, sorry, that's not it. Sorry about that. It's this one. We're going to look tonight at this appellate's brief again, okay? And we're going to be kicking off here on issue number 2, which is that the trial court erred by admitting statements Allen made while gravely disabled during his unprecedented pretrial solitary confinement. Okay, so this is all about Gull once again making huge errors, particularly in allowing prejudice into this case in terms of these false statements, okay, these false confessions. Okay. So we're going to start off here and dive on in. Just give me a moment to have some water and get my throat ready. Okay, so here we go. We're going to kick it off like this. Solitary confinement is a form of punishment, and depending on its conditions, even torture. Okay, now keep in mind, this is coming from the UN General Assembly interim report on torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. 2011. Solitary confinement is a form of punishment and, depending on its conditions, even torture. By 2023, when Allen was held in solitary for, yes, 13 months, okay, 13 months. I'm trying to be snarky here and put it in the chat. 13 months. It was well established that prolonged isolation causes psychological pain, suicidal ideation, and psychosis. To protect inmates from psychological harm, the IDOC strictly prohibits solitary confinement over periods of 30 days for anyone with serious mental illnesses, and requires transfer if serious mental illness symptoms appear. When Allen exhibited the predictable symptoms of psychological pain, confusion, and psychosis, IDOC administrators refused to transfer him to a mental health unit. When Allen's attorneys informed the court of his dire condition, the court also refused to move him. And the prosecutor delayed and mocked. That's right. The very immature Masonic prosecutor delayed and mocked the defense counsel's concerns about Allen's condition while collecting evidence in terms of Allen's confessions. The question for this court, or this appeals court, is unprecedented but simple. Should the state be able to benefit from Allen's psychosis or psychological pain that their deliberate indifference to his mental health caused? Human decency provides the answer, which is no. Standard of review and additional facts. An appellate court reviews a suppression denial for substantial evidence of probative value that supports the trial court's decision. It considers uncontradicted evidence favorable to the defendant and reviews legal issues de novo. The voluntariness of a confession is a legal issue. This is not ambiguous. Allen moved to suppress his statements while in solitary confinement, which the court summarily denied. The court reasoned the statements were voluntary because Allen, quote unquote, failed to show that they resulted from state psychological coercion or coercive interrogation, although they did. The court, Judge Gull, found Allen's detention was intended to, quote unquote, protect him, which we call safekeeping like a motherfucker. And that while he suffered from major depressive disorder, which is a serious mental illness according to the IDOC, and anxiety, the court nevertheless declared he did not have serious mental illness that would render his statements involuntary. What a contradiction. In addition to the IDOC records and videos like those admitted at trial, Allen proffered an order and settlement from Indiana Protection and Advocacy versus IDOC that the trial court excluded from the suppression hearing as irrelevant. In 2011, the Southern District of Indiana held that the IDOC's housing of serious mental illness inmates in solitary constituted, quote unquote, cruel and unusual punishment. That's the Southern District of Indiana, violating the Eighth Amendment. The Southern District found that serious mental illness includes delusional disorder, psychotic disorder, and major depressive disorder, which is what Rick Allen's diagnosis was. Quoting from the document, segregation is harmful to prisoners with serious mental illness due to lack of social interaction, significant sensory deprivation, and forced idleness, leading to decompensation and psychological pain. An inmate decompensating from solitary may experience, and here's your list, hallucinations, sleep disturbance, memory problems, anxiety, paranoia, depression, eating problems, or engaging in self-injury or suicide. Suicide Watch further exacerbates the illness. The severe conditions in the segregation units cause a predictable deterioration of serious mental illness prisoners' mental health, and the IDOC has explicitly observed, diagnosed, and noted patient decompensation. Matter of fact, the IDOC knew these effects occurred even in non-serious mental illness offenders. Okay, and just for your edification purposes, let me show you here what that is referring to. Okay, so let's see if I can manage. Where is that? Oh, it's here. It's this one here. Let's see. Boom. This is what was referred to here. It's Defendant's Exhibit U, okay? Indiana Protection and Advocacy Services Commission versus Commissioner, Indiana Department of Correction. And you can go find this yourself. This is Defendant's Exhibit U, okay? And you can see here, it goes through all of the information. We're not going to read it tonight, but I have it for you. If you need it, I'll email it. Otherwise, you can find it on your own. Defendant's Exhibit U, okay? That's what this is. Let's get back to the brief. Before a hearing on relief, the parties reached a settlement, including an expanded definition of serious mental illness that subsumed the court's definition. The IDOC's policies refer to the settlement, which sets the policy's tone. An inmate with serious mental illness can only be held in solitary 30 days. If an inmate decompensates into serious mental illness and is unlikely to return to general population within 30 days, the transfer is required. Allen admitted Dr. Westcott's 127-page report. On August 21st, 2023, Westcott evaluated Allen, who had been in WCU Westville Correctional over 9 months. He was terrified, unsure of what was real, and wondering if he was dead and in hell or waiting for heaven. He could not recall weeks of early 2023, which is the time when he was under the absolute depths of his psychotic episode, including playing with feces, confessing, or banging his head. He believed he had been drugged, because he had. Westcott cited IDOC records showing acute periods of confusion, paranoia, delusional thinking, cognitive slowing, aggression, and combativeness. During this period of loss of touch with reality, Allen just coincidentally, quote unquote, confessed. Westcott concluded Allen's psychosis stemmed from major depressive disorder, his personality, and the well-known effects of solitary confinement. Allen was grossly disorganized, delusional, and paranoid. Objective testing ruled out any malingering or faking it. Okay. The trial court abused its discretion by refusing to admit this settlement or order into the suppression hearing as a reference exhibit. Evidence is relevant if it has any tendency to make a fact of consequence in determining the action more or less probable than it would be without it. Here, the order settlement makes it more likely that Allen's psychosis was caused by his confinement, naturally. The order found that solitary confinement causes all of the symptoms Allen experienced. Allen was more likely to experience this decompensation because he spent 7 months on suicide watch. 7 months on suicide watch. So think about it. You guys might remember Noe in our last Friday episode last week, describing that just 15 hours in solitary. No. Sorry. See, it's a difficult thing to talk about. Just 15 hours on suicide watch, Noe was already hearing voices and experiencing the beginning signs of an acute psychosis. Noe, in totality, was in solitary for 65 days, but it only took 15 hours on suicide watch for him to experience these onset of these symptoms. You see here that although Allen was in this solitary confinement for 13 months, 7 of these months were on suicide watch. Now remember, that's 7x. That's 7 times over IDOC's own policy, which is 30 days, which is also standard pretty much worldwide, which is actually more like 2 weeks, but 30 days maximum is the standard worldwide. But of course, in Indiana, although their standard is 30 days, Allen went 7 times. Okay, he went 7 months. The order settlement also makes it more likely that Allen was subjected to psychological coercion. So for anyone who's saying these confessions were not coerced, listen closely. Allen was subjected to psychological coercion by showing solitary causes psychological pain. It demonstrates state action that the IDOC placing and keeping Allen in solitary and on suicide watch for 7 months was knowingly causing this very predictable psychological pain or coercion. This is called your modern day waterboarding, which is why I titled this show The GITMO Treatment of Richard Allen, because GITMO is known for, it's infamous for waterboarding and torture, remember? which is essentially what has happened to Rick Allen. He was essentially, or in essence, waterboarded, tortured. The order settlement also shows how extensively IDOC violated its own in-house policy, as it includes major depressive disorder in the serious mental illness definition, restricting Allen's solitary confinement to 30 days. Allen was harmed by the court's refusal to consider this order settlement because it undermined the court's findings and conclusions. The state failed to prove Allen's statements made while gravely disabled were voluntary, because they were not. Okay, because the state could not prove that these statements were voluntary because they were not. So therefore, this is part of the railroading of Richard Allen. And we're going to get into that very deeply tonight. So you have a seat and strap in. Number one, the U.S. Constitution. The state failed to prove that Allen's statements were not a product of psychological coercion, which is torture. An involuntary statement obtained through, quote, state action, okay, involuntary through state action, violates due process and is inadmissible. Colorado versus Connolly. A confession is voluntary if it is a product of a rational intellect and freely self-determined rather than overborne by state law enforcement conduct. State law enforcement can include psychiatric facilities and prison staff. Statements produced through a coercive environment are involuntary, regardless of whether solicited through police interrogation, and that's U.S. v. Karake. Okay? Statements produced through a coercive environment, such as the one Rick Allen was in Westville, are regardless whether solicited through police interrogation or not. Okay? Months spent in solitary confinement, deprived of light, adequate food, and contact with the outside world is by itself sufficient to sustain a finding of involuntary. Let's read that again. This is your precedent. Months of this is by itself sufficient to sustain a finding of involuntariness, which means this appeals court or this appellate tribunal needs to overturn this. Okay, there's a very high likelihood, or at least there's a very strong argument here and probability that this must be or will be overturned. The crucial element is police overreach, or in other words, law enforcement overreach, or in other words, state overreach, okay, through the prison staff. When state actors use more subtle forms of psychological coercion, which is exactly what this was, the defendant's mental illness is more significant in the voluntariness determination. But the state must still exploit the defendant's illness with coercive tactics. This is generally done through aggressive interrogation, but exploitation can occur in other ways. It's difficult to imagine a situation in which a confession would be less the product of a free intellect, less voluntary, than when brought about by a drug having the effect of a truth serum. Let's say Haldol. For a statement to be involuntary, state action must be causally related to the confession. The state's prolonged solitary confinement of Allen was a state action. Contrary to the court's finding that Allen failed to prove state psychological coercion. See, this is judicial bias. Once again, this is calling out the judicial bias of Judge Fran Gull. Contrary to Judge Fran Gull's finding that Allen failed to prove state psychological coercion, it was the state's burden to prove that Allen's statements were voluntary by a preponderance of evidence, and we know that that did not occur. To the extent that Allen had a minimal burden of production, he met that burden. Prolonged maximum security solitary confinement of a pretrial detainee, especially after psychosis develops, is state action. Unlike the mentally ill defendant in Connolly who walked into a police station and confessed, Allen never voluntarily came into custody. He consistently protested his innocence until enduring 5 months of maximum security solitary with no human contact except while chained or caged. Because it was pretrial, Allen's solitary confinement was unprecedented and borderline, if not unconstitutional, punishment. Other IDOC safekeepers were in mental health units, not solitary. On a continuum of possible punishments in the justice system, solitary confinement in a maximum security facility is the most extreme type of punishment. Also, Allen's solitary exceeded the 30-day IDOC policy restriction. IDOC knew that it would harm Allen, not that it could, that it would. When IDOC observed Allen's very predictable psychological deterioration and physical, they refused to transfer him to a medical facility. Keeping Allen in solitary when he was no doubt seriously mentally ill was an administrative, not a clinical decision. Finally, the state's conduct also involved the prosecutor, law enforcement, and the court. That's right. Prosecutor, law enforcement, and the court. Remember when I said this entire structure came together to achieve this bulldozing, steamrolling, railroading, and absolute crucifixion of Richard Allen in the court of law? It was an architecture designed for one specific purpose, and that's what they're calling out here. Finally, the state's conduct involved the prosecutor, law enforcement, and the judge. After Allen filed his April 5th emergency transfer motion citing his dire condition, the prosecutor waited 9 fucking days to respond, while investigators monitored real-time calls, during which Allen also confessed. Do you see what's happening here? This is the literal coercion or extraction of confessions through torture. During this delay, Allen continued deteriorating. The prosecutor then mocked the defense concerns as colorful and dramatic, while that same day, the IDOC itself found Allen gravely disabled. Remember, these were the man down incidents. These were the forced medication incidents. These were the gravely mentally disabled. These were the absolutely declared psychotic episodes. And yes, these are what the prosecutor mocked as colorful and dramatic. Remember, he gaslit the entire world. Remember all of the post-sentencing press tour he did when he went on multiple podcasts, and he made sure to make the rounds mocking, doubling down. Knowing Allen was decompensating, the court refused to transfer him, putting the onus on the IDOC to provide care. It is fundamentally wrong to keep a gravely disabled individual like Rick Allen in solitary while using his statements during this gravely disabled period against him. In other words, we're saying that they delayed as much as they could in every single way possible. And all of you who followed this entire process know that. Remember the 9 months of waiting, the 7 months of waiting, the year of waiting for particular handing over of information to the defense. So you have to really wrap your mind around the fact that this delay in addressing his psychological health was intentional, because during this period, they had the psychologist, the corrections officers, and the suicide companions or other inmates interacting with him, fishing information and extracting information and suggesting information to him. The prosecutor 1 week later sought all medical records, videos, and communications while confessions were ongoing. Monitoring and collecting his statements consumed hundreds of hours and produced over 60 confessions. Remember the gaslight? 61 confessions. I mentioned that before. 61 confessions, which never happened. But we're going to talk about some confessions that did happen later tonight. But yeah, the 61 confessions to killing Abby and Libby, which ended up only being a handful. ISP interviewed inmates, guards, and even sent a psychologist to speak with Dr. Walla. Allen showed in the course of this process more than sufficient state action aimed at coercing these confessions. The state's prolonged pretrial solitary confinement was psychological coercion. It was coercion. So let's not hear it. The bloodlusters, the troll farm, the guilters, the gaslighters, the deniers of reality. We're not going to hear that there was not coercion. Allen's solitary was psychological coercion because it was prolonged, caused psychological pain, and put him at the mercy of the state. The prolonged nature is coercion because solitary confinement can bring a person to the edge of madness and perhaps to madness itself. This has been recognized in literature, law, and science. Solitary causes psychological trauma, including psychosis, hallucinations, and paranoia, all three of which Rick Allen repeatedly exhibited during this entire process. Yes, I am making the bold declaration that Rick Allen exhibited multiple episodes of psychosis, multiple hallucinations, and multiple episodes of paranoia. Some of these things are not even documented in this entire process because they happened on private phone calls with family members and others. But Rick Allen suffered repeated episodes of psychosis, repeated hallucinations, and repeated moments of paranoia. From day one at Westville, Allen was placed in a strip cell, the most restrictive cell in the most restrictive solitary unit in Indiana, with only bare essentials and a camera constantly recording him. Soon thereafter, IDOC ordered guards to videotape him when out of the cell, including when showering and his attorney's visits. Inmates, i.e., suicide companions, remained outside his door, documenting every word he said and everything he did, regardless of his suicide watch status. That's right, every 5 minutes. He had no contact with anyone unless caged, shackled, or chained. And it's even worse. Remember, he was fitted with a shock vest. He was led around on a leash or a lead. And that shock vest was activated while he was in it. And it was even worse. And we'll get to that shortly. Additionally, The sensory deprivation, social isolation, and forced idleness is difficult even for healthy people to endure. Early videos show Alan pacing in his cell, laying down on the floor, hours upon end, doing leg crunches, writing, reading, and looking distressed. Within 2 weeks, Alan said he was broken. Within 2 weeks. He told his wife, if this becomes too much for you, call the detectives and I will tell them, quote, whatever they want to know. Is that a confession? In other words, he loves his wife so much, he says, if this gets too difficult for you, call the detectives. I'll tell them whatever they want to know. Had Alan's solitary been 30 or even 90 days, he would have not decompensated to this extent, but it was 13 months. The prolonged solitary confinement caused Alan very predictable psychological pain, paranoia, nightmares, memory problems, confusion. It is undisputed that Alan deteriorated to being gravely disabled. Even the state actors admit this, and very psychotic. And the IDOC involuntarily administered antipsychotics between April and late June multiple times. If he was not in the midst of psychotic episodes, why were they administering antipsychotic medications forcibly? Although Walla noted concerns about feigning, okay, so remember, she's a DELPHI Gilter channel. She's a DELPHI Gilter channel, true crime fanatic. 3 hours a day on the way to work to go medicate Rick Allen. You understand what I'm saying? She was concerned about him feigning, but she diagnosed psychosis. Okay? She suspected incompetence and over-medication. So which is it? Which is it? Are you committing medical malpractice by injecting and forcibly medicating someone who is not who is feigning? So you're declaring he's feigning, or that he's acting, or he's malingering. So either you and your entire up the chain of command, either you're all committing malpractice or having some kind of misconduct by performing these involuntary medications or injections, or you're lying and gaslighting, and he's actually psychotic, and you're properly medicating. So which is it? You have to choose one. It can't be both. Solitary put Alan in a constant state of vulnerability. Solitary confinement has long been recognized as psychologically coercive, equated to rack the thumb screw, equated to the rack, the thumb screw. Those are torture, medieval instruments or devices of torture. Pretrial solitary confinement is punishment and conveys without the necessity of spoken words the implied threat of further punishment. And Rick Allen knew they were doing that to him. It does not matter why a defendant was in solitary, whether justified or whether the prison planned further punishment. In this harsh environment, Dr. Manakawala controlled all aspects of Alan's life, including whether he got bedding, whether he got clothing, whether he got meal items, books, personal items, utensils. She could provide a new window, a new tablet, or she could punitively strip him of all the bare necessities, except for a paper gown. Privileges were contingent upon pleasing Dr. Manakawala. Whether she had ill intent is irrelevant. It is what Alan thought and felt, and what solitary confinement did to him or would do to any person. C. Alan's confessions were a product of solitary induced psychosis, not a rational intellect. Indiana Department of Correction records show that Richard Allen continued to suffer from psychosis during the times he confessed. On April 5th, when he confessed to Dr. Walla, he was not eating or sleeping and was drinking from the toilet. On May 3rd, when he confessed, Allen had symptoms of paranoia and disorientation, despite Walla claiming he presented as more organized than he had been. The day before, he was confusing nightmares with reality and claimed to have started World War II. Would he also claim to have been King Michael to save Donald Trump, to start World War III, that if he'd go to sleep, the world would end? Sure, these are organized thoughts and voluntary statements. He was too just disjointed to hold conversations. Days earlier, he covered himself in feces and claimed he was King Michael. His confessions to guards occurred during this very bizarre and psychotic behavior, during this very period. Guards believed he was faking, just like Monica Walla, right? But they're not clinicians. And Dr. Westcott found no malingering through objective testing. Allen confessed to his family on April 3rd, May 10th, May 17th, May 25th, June 11th. That's April, May, June. April, May, June. Listen, on April 3rd, he fell to the floor, asked if he was dead, and was suicidal. On May 10th, the same day he confessed, he believed he was dead. The world would blow up if he slept. His water was poisoned, and he was reliving the same day over and over, Groundhog Day. On May 17th, another day he confessed. He was paranoid of attorneys and staff with Odin patches. On May 25th, another day he confessed. He paced for 2 hours and banged his head violently against the iron door and wall. On June 11th, another day of confession. He thought he was in hell and did not understand what was happening. In August, Allen did not remember confessing. He did not remember weeks of early April, which was the depths of his psychotic episodes. Throughout, he complained of memory loss. State action, state actors, the state of Indiana overbore Allen's free will. Allen did not confess until after 5 to 7 months of solitary confinement. Before his arrest, he consistently denied any involvement. Dr. Westcott opined that Allen's psychosis was caused by the stress of solitary confinement or pre-existing illness. Dr. Walla agreed that a lot of the time, solitary confinement exacerbates mental illness, and it is reasonable to believe that Allen's confinement caused his psychosis. Wait, I thought he was faking, Dr. Monica Walla. Which is it? The social isolation of solitary makes people question their self. If you're treated like you're guilty, you begin to think you are. Dr. Grazian testified a false memory starts with a belief. In his first confession to his wife, Allen said, "I think I did it." In his first confession to Dr. Walla, he was unsure if he had sex with the girls. Allen got facts wrong repeatedly and confessed to crimes he did not commit. Allen claimed he shot the girls. Is my understanding, he also claimed he killed individuals who do not exist. If Allen confessed to things that are completely nonsensical and not based in reality, and if those confessions are deemed uncredible, then why is it that the state was able to pick and choose which statements were credible and which were not? Indiana Constitution, the state failed to prove Allen's statements were the product of a rational intellect rather than the state's own misconduct. The Indiana Constitution protects against the admission of involuntary statements. Indiana's test is like the due process standard, requiring a confession to be, quote, freely self-determined by a rational intellect and free will. Well, we know none of that applied in Allen's case. However, Indiana's is more robust because it requires the state to prove voluntariness beyond a reasonable doubt. It also does not require the state action to be coercive to overcome a mentally ill person's will. In this case, the IDOC's refusal to apply their 30-day policy to Richard Allen and to transfer him to a medical unit after he deteriorated is at a minimum negligent state conduct or misconduct that caused Allen's psychosis and confessions. And the prosecutor's willful delay and the trial court's utter refusal to set a timely hearing exacerbated Richard Allen's deterioration. This is conduct that our Constitution cannot tolerate, regardless of whether it constitutes coercion under the federal due process laws. Also, the evidence does not show that statements were product of a rational intellect beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember, Indiana determines that the statements must be the product of a rational intellect and free will beyond a reasonable doubt. Allen was considered gravely disabled through June 16th when he received his last emergency injection due to self-harm. Though Monica Walla sometimes described Allen as more coherent than prior, or his symptoms as not significant, the state cannot have it both ways. That is, Allen decompensated to the point of forced medication but remained rational beyond a reasonable doubt? No way. This must be addressed. This must be overturned. Even if Allen could occasionally hold somewhat of a coherent conversation, it does not render his confessions voluntary. Even if the court finds that Allen's statements were voluntary, they are a product of unconstitutional detention. Allen's prolonged solitary confinement violated Article 1, Section 12 and 15. Indiana courts are constitutionally bound by the basic concepts of fairness and are frequently identified with due process in the federal Constitution. Article 1, Section 12 guarantees for every person, for every injury done to him in his person, remedy by due course of law. Here, Allen was sent to solitary for quote-unquote safekeeping, but he was harmed. Without a hearing or notice, even when his attorneys informed the court of his dire condition, the court refused to set a hearing in violation of Indiana Code Section 3533.11.2. Although the court eventually held a hearing on June 15th, 2023, by that time the damage was done and all the confessions had been coerced or extracted out of him. Fairness protections in criminal cases are found in different Indiana constitutional provisions. Just as pretrial punishment violates federal due process, it violates the Indiana Constitution. Indiana is one of 6 states protecting citizens from unnecessary rigor. The framers wrote, "No person arrested or confined in jail shall be treated with unnecessary rigor." Typically, this provision requires a prisoner suffers severe mistreatment, which we know happened and we will prove to you tonight. Recognizing this provision applies to solitary confinement, the Indiana Supreme Court stated, this is Indiana Supreme Court, the very essence of punishment and the sole use of prison walls is the confinement of the convict within them. Again, for those in the back who remember they were promoting a hit out on Richard Allen and say he deserves whatever he gets. Remember those guys? Yeah, one of them happens to be a child molester in this community. Well, Mr. Child Molester, the very essence of punishment and the sole use of the prison walls is the confinement of the convict within them. In other words, your time is your punishment. Your confinement is your punishment. Humanity indeed forbids, as unnecessary rigor, that confinement be absolutely solitary or that all his natural and civil rights should be temporarily annihilated. Listen to this. Do civil rights become annihilated because you're confined? The answer is no. Here, Allen's treatment indeed rose to the level of unnecessary. Okay, rigor is the act or instance of strictness, severity, or cruelty. So Allen's treatment rose to the level of unnecessary strictness, severity, and cruelty. When Allen started suffering from confusion, memory lapses, paranoia, and bizarre behaviors, there was no longer a risk he could not handle the harsh conditions of maximum security solitary. It was a reality. The strictness, severity, and cruelty of his confinement is evident on video where he is screaming in fear. Again, remember the videos that the judge did not allow to be played with the audio? You wonder why? He's screaming in fear. He's confused about where he is. He's unable to respond, drooling and committing self-harm. This strictness, severity, and cruelty was physical too. Allen lost 40 pounds. He lost 40 pounds. He was unable to care for himself at all. He was tased repeatedly. His face was black and blue and at times bleeding from banging his own face against the iron and concrete of the cell. He was poisoned by consuming fecal matter and toilet water repeatedly. There was utter indifference to his catatonia, and it's shown where medical staff discussed blood pressure and cholesterol with a vacant Allen who had been lying on the floor for hours and hours and hours for weeks upon end. This psychological and physical pain was absolutely unnecessary. Remember, the time after you're sentenced is your punishment. The time in confinement, that is your punishment after your sentence, after your conviction and sentencing, not your pretrial confinement. IDOC could have transferred him upon the first signs of deterioration, as its policy requires, being that he does suffer from a pre-diagnosed major depressive disorder, and that is absolutely deemed a serious mental illness in the IDOC's own policy. Even an isolated infirmary cell would have been better than the whole designated for punishment. And remember what I said, more than 7 months of suicide watch. Likewise, the court could have moved him whenever they chose, which means Judge Gull, remember every time you hear the court, it means Judge Gull. Judge Gull could have moved him whenever she fucking wanted, and she chose not to because the punitive environment was what they all wanted, because they needed him to agree to a plea deal that he ended up never agreeing to. That's right. I said it before. The constitutional violations require suppression. Over 150 years ago, Dostoevsky wrote, "The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons." Well, oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, you do not want to enter any fucking jail or prison in the United States of America, because let me tell you, it is hell on earth. In 2015, writing about the effects of solitary, Justice Kennedy hearkened to this quote, noting, "There is truth to this in our own time." Applying this exclusionary rule to these constitutional violations would deter abuses within our prison system and law enforcement. Protect judicial system integrity by showing it condemns such conduct. And protect the human dignity of those unable to make bond while awaiting trial. In fact, Indiana has a robust exclusionary rule. Indiana adopted the exclusionary rule long before the Fourth Amendment exclusionary rule applied to the states. Under this exclusionary rule, to determine whether a statement is the product of an illegal detention, the court must ask if the statement, quote unquote, has been come at by exploitation of that illegality, or instead by means of sufficiently distinguishable to be purged of the primary taint. And I don't mean Jerry Holman's taint. The court considers the time elapsed between the illegality and the acquisition of the evidence, the presence of the intervening circumstances, and the purpose and flagrancy of the official misconduct. First, Allen's statements occurred during the illegality of his detention at WCU. Second, there were no intervening circumstances. Again, there is a very well-known connection between solitary confinement and psychosis and delirium. Thirdly, the constitutional violation was flagrant because IDOC violated its own fucking policies for keeping Allen safe. And the court and prosecutor refused to help even when Allen's attorneys warned of his deterioration. They pleaded. You see what I mean? By Gull and McClellan wanted this because they needed him to bend over and give that plea. And he refused. So they persisted. Even if the appellate court finds Allen's statements were voluntary because he was not interrogated by law enforcement, he was still gravely disabled when he confessed. And as such, his free will did not purge the taint of his illegal detention. The trial court erred, Judge Gull erred by denying the motion to suppress. And this error was not harmless. Before a federal state constitutional error can be held harmless, the court must find it was harmless, quote unquote, beyond a reasonable doubt. We come to that again. No piece of evidence may have greater sway over a jury than a defendant's confessions. The erroneous admission of statements to Dr. Manakawala alone was prejudicial because they were a large part of the state's case. They were the only compelling part of the state's case. Let's be honest here. Without the confessions, quote unquote, state didn't have a case. The prosecutor particularly concentrated on Allen's May 3rd statement, arguing that Allen knew a fact only the killer would know. But remember, this is at the height of his psychosis. The confessions also countered Allen's confident and unwavering pretrial protest of innocence when he was not in the depths of his psychotic episodes. The court, Judge Gull, denied Allen his right to present a complete defense to explain the scene and impeach investigation. And that's what we covered in the previous episode. So we're going to pull this down and we're going to get into the real shit, okay? So right now, we're going to pull up a few things that all of you need to really fucking understand. Let's see. It's going to take a moment. So it's hard to know where to start here. There's a lot. Okay. So what I need to do is first I want to go to where is it? All right. This is relevant to this particular topic. This is Brad Rozzi's motion to suppress statement. Okay, let's read through it. This is so crucially important that we all pay attention now. Okay, so everyone, especially if you're new, open up your ears because this is where it gets deep. You're only an hour and a half in. Okay, so this is where it starts to get deep. Motion to suppress. Richard Allen respectfully requests that this court suppress as evidence in this cause any and all oral and written communications, confessions, statements, or admissions alleged to have been made by defendant Allen during his pretrial detention. In support of this motion, Defendant Allen states the following. Defendant Allen is charged with 2 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of murder. During the course of Allen's pretrial detention, it is alleged that Defendant Allen communicated incriminating statements to state actors, just like our YouTubers, and or their agents, our YouTubers, Monica Walla, Gray Hughes, etc., etc. Troll Farm. All of which the state of Indiana intends to present to a jury at trial. The statements were involuntary and thus obtained in violation of the following: the 5th Amendment, the 6th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and Article 1, Section 12, 13, and 14 of the Indiana Constitution. Those statements sought to be suppressed were obtained as a result of, listen to it, psychological and mental coercion illegally directed against the defendant, and such statements were therefore involuntarily given. You see, this is absolute fact. This is the absolute fact. Number 4, the statements sought to be suppressed were obtained as a result of psychological and mental coercion illegally directed against the defendant, and as such, statements were therefore involuntarily given. This is what I mean about the waterboarding of Richard Allen in Westville, the GITMO of Indiana, the GITMO, the Westville welcome of Richard Allen. The statements sought to be suppressed were obtained as a result of physical coercion illegally directed against the defendant, and such statements were therefore involuntarily given. Yes, that's right. He didn't say psychological there, did he? Did he? No. He said physical coercion. You're going to learn more about that momentarily. Therefore, any and all communications, confessions, statements, or admissions alleged to have been offered up by Defendant Allen were elicited in violation of his constitutional rights under the 5th, 6th, 14th Amendments, right? And 14th, 13th, and 12th articles of the, 1, 12, Article 1, Section 12, 13, and 14 of the Indiana Constitution. Now, here we go with the real shit. Memorandum in support of Defendant Allen's motion to suppress. Facts. Defendant Allen was arrested October 2022 and immediately detained in Carroll County. Afterwards, he was transferred to White County and ultimately charged with 2 counts of felony murder. The charges were lodged against him on October 28th, 2022. On November 3rd, the Carroll County Sheriff petitioned the court for an order transferring jurisdiction of Allen's custody to the Carroll County Sheriff, from the Carroll County Sheriff to the Indiana DOC. Hey, remember, on the same day, without the formality of a hearing, Judge Benjamin Diener signed an order, the safekeeping order, transferring Allen's custody to IDOC without Allen or his legal representatives having any input into his pretrial detainment. And remember this, Judge Diener wrote that fucking order. You guys remember that? So Judge Diener wrote the safekeeping order, which he then signed to transfer on out. And yeah, sure, no one ever mentions that. Isn't that misconduct, malpractice, illegal, not allowed? So he writes the safekeeping order, he signs his own fucking order, then he recuses himself, which hands Richard Allen over to the demons. Allen was then shipped off to Westville and placed in the maximum security segregation unit referred to by prison officials as the Hole. The record suggests that just prior to his transfer to WCU, Allen may have made a brief stop at the Reception Diagnostic Center where some sort of intake procedure may have taken place, but it does not appear that Allen underwent any formal mental health assessment or testing to establish a baseline in terms of his mental health history or needs. From approximately November 1st, 2022 through December of 2023, Allen remained incarcerated at Westville Correctional. Allen's attorneys are unaware of any other pretrial detainee that has ever been housed in Westville in the history of the facility, and most certainly not in the 5 or so years preceding his placement. Westville Warden John Gallipo, who served in IDOC for 28 years, acknowledged during his entire tenure he was unaware of any other circumstance involving a pretrial detention of a man who had not yet been convicted. That's right. Even after 28 years at IDOC, Gallipo could not recall a single other pretrial detainee. Allen's attorneys have conducted depositions, watched video from Allen's cell and other video from within the prison, reviewed records regarding his detention, reviewed his medical and psychiatric records, listened to audio interviews of prison inmates, guards, and other individuals conducted by law enforcement. Throughout this process, Allen's attorneys have learned that Allen has been accused of making incriminating statements to both inmates and guards. Nearly all of these statements appear to have occurred between mid-March of 2023 and June of 2023. That's right, March, April, May, June. During this time frame, there also exist medical and psychiatric records suggesting that Allen was in a state of deep psychosis. Allen's defense team learned that Allen was not only detained in an isolation cell in WCU, but that prison officials chose to post inmates at Allen's cell door and required the inmates to keep logs of all of Allen's actions, statements, and behaviors. I hear this every 5 minutes. I hear that these inmates were taunting, baiting, harassing, praying, stalking, feeding, and all of the above to Rick Allen. This occurred during all hours of the day and night and continued over the course of Allen's stay in the WCU. These inmates, all of whom are convicted felons and gang members, were not only actively engaged in surveilling Allen, but were also communicating with him. Allen's attorneys learned that at some point in early 2023, early April of 2023, prison staff deliberately pulled the inmates. Well, I'm going to tell you why. And replaced them with prison guards. You know why? Because they were calling their family members and telling other inmates about all that was happening, being said, being done, being seen. They were calling home, telling relatives. The information was leaking out. Leaks were just ubiquitous. There was a two-way road or two-way feed of information, both information from Allen's going out and information from out coming into Allen. Allen's attorneys have learned that this appears to have been prompted by an inmate or inmates engaging Allen regarding his pending charges and communicating Allen's thoughts and words to their families, thereby violating any sense of confidentiality that might exist. Most notably, Allen's living circumstances within the prison appear to have been designed to expose him to some of the harshest conditions that even the most heinous of convicted felons have not endured. This coercive environment was initially the product of Allen being detained in an observation cell used for convicted inmates with suicidal ideations. That means suicide watch. The single cell located in APOD is one of the approximately 60 individual segregation cells, all containing felons convicted of crimes such as burglary, robbery, child molest, and murder. Each and every one of these inmates had the ability to communicate with Allen by yelling at him at all hours of the day and night, and by chastising him every time he was removed from his cell for the purposes of recreation, showering, or other administrative reasons. Allen's attorneys have learned that he was referred to as a baby killer and that he was the target of other similar accusations during his stay. Prison records reflect that Allen was placed on suicide watch during the majority of his stay at WCU, including upon his initial detention in November of 2023. That's right, suicide watch for the majority of his stay. How long was his stay? 13 months. What is a majority of 13? This occurred despite the fact that there were no underlying findings to suggest he was suicidal. Allen's designation as suicidal subjected him to harsher circumstances than those of other offenders and convicted offenders in the unit. For example, Allen's bed consisted of a metal plate with a thin mattress, all of which was just a few inches from the concrete floor. Allen was issued an anti-suicide smock, which covered his body no better than that of a garment of a caveman. Allen's food was served to him through a cuff portal, and his dining habits involved him sitting on his bed or on the floor of his cell. His cell was not equipped with a table or chair that otherwise would serve even as a rudimentary dining arrangement. Allen's cell also contained a steel toilet and sink, both in direct line of sight of the inmates and guards assigned to his surveil. The toilet bowl was located approximately 24 inches from the bed. Allen's attorneys learned that Allen was not only under constant surveillance, but the lights remained on in his cell for many days and nights on end. It was also true that his suicide watch designation, due to it, he was afforded less or no recreation time and less of an opportunity for showers. In essence, his suicide designation was the cause for the removal of additional privileges to the extent the word privilege even applies. Now remember, he was a pretrial detainee. He should have had more privileges than anyone else in that building, but he had fewer. This further fostered an environment that led to the deterioration of Allen's mental and physical health. In all, for nearly 13 months at WCU, Allen was deprived of any social interaction, very little to no privacy, limited to no recreation time, and was left to entertain himself. Unfortunately, his unusual detention circumstances would extend far beyond the door of the isolation cell. He was shackled with ankle cuffs, a belly chain, box cuffs, and guided around by guards on a lead, or what most people would refer to as a leash. As if this wasn't enough, prison officials assigned a videographer to videotape Allen's movements around the prison, including when he would meet with his lawyers. During all of the meetings between Allen and his attorneys, he remained shackled, making simple tasks difficult, such as taking a drink of water from a water bottle. He couldn't communicate as much as a hand gesture due to his shackled state. During other meetings, prison officials placed a video camera outside of a window in a visitation room and required Allen to sit in a hard plastic chair directly in line with the video camera, which was less than 10 feet away, aiming directly at his mouth. Allen's highly unusual detention circumstances extended even to visits with his wife. During one visit, Allen was transported outside of the WCU Westville Control Unit to a building reserved for visitation for inmates in general population. Again, Allen was shackled and confined during the transport and ultimately re-robed into a green jumpsuit before seeing his wife. He was, however, unshackled during the visit. His embrace with his wife was controlled by prison protocol, which permitted only a few brief seconds of contact, despite the fact that Allen had not seen his wife for the better part of 6 months. Allen was required to sit on the opposite side of the table from his wife and had 2 prison guards stationed within earshot of each end of the table. They were left with absolutely zero privacy. The room was completely empty except for his lawyers and a few other prison guards who were stationed within the building. This provided no background noise whatsoever, which might offer some aspect of privacy. Allen's unusual detention involves an even stranger set of circumstances. During the course of their representation, Allen's attorneys discovered the existence of dozens and dozens of police reports, audio interviews, and investigative findings that centered on a group of suspects considered the Odinists, all of whom were referenced in the Frank's motion and memorandum and the second Frank's motion and memorandum. Allen incorporates the details. Okay. Allen also battled depression throughout most of his adult life. He was medicated over the course of his life and, in fact, sought therapeutic resources to treat and manage his depression. The IDOC gave little consideration to Allen's condition at the time of his intake and his initial incarceration, especially given the unusual circumstances in which he was detained. It's also believed that Allen's medication was administered in a less than consistent fashion when he was on the unit, all of which would have contributed to his inability to endure his living environment during his pretrial detention. Now we're going to move ahead to something extremely concerning. Oh, no, it didn't load. Oh, no, hold on. I'm going to have to do this another way. Hold on. I'm going to pull this up. Let's see. Oh, just a moment. Where is it? All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to have to do this differently because these pages didn't load. Let's see. We're going to pull this down. Just a moment, please. All right, so we got it. Now listen, this is extremely important here. So this is where I want everyone to focus in, okay? We're going to focus in here. This is from the volume 7 of the appellate appendix. Okay? So this is volume 7 and we're starting here on page 200, okay? Allen endured a longer, more sustained form of interrogation, one that lasted more than 5 months before he was finally broken. After already suffering from a bona fide mental health disorder and having been cut off from the moral support of his wife, mother, and daughter, Allen was weakened to the point that he slipped into a state of psychosis plagued with a grossly disorganized, delusional, paranoid, and highly dysfunctional behavior. These behaviors were manifested through verbal confessions that he may have been drugged, verbal confessions to the double homicides, inconsistent with known facts about the crime scene, periods of not sleeping for days, paranoia, stripping off of clothes, drinking toilet water, covering himself with and eating his own feces. Okay? Now, here's where I want you to look at the screen. I'm going to actually come up. Now, this is for the bloodlusty, meth head, white supremacist, one percenter, rage-filled, meth-fueled, crack addict, bloodlusty, perverted demons of Central Indiana, who I call the troll farm, who say he confessed. He's guilty. Listen to this. On one occasion, Allen confessed to molesting two young girls and shooting them in the back. On one occasion, Richard Allen confessed to molesting those two young girls, Abby and Libby, and shooting them in the back. See attached transcribed statement of inmate companion Lacey Patton Jr. On other occasions, he professed to his sorrow for molesting Abby and Libby and others who he specifically named. See Michael Roberts' statements. Those facts are known to be false, none of which are supported by the autopsy findings of Dr. Roland Kaur as to the cause of death of the girls, and unsupported by the absence of any evidence that either of the girls were sexually assaulted near or before the time of their deaths. At the time Allen uttered these false statements, the state actors were in the ready position with pen in hand documenting the entirety of Allen's mental and physical deterioration and actions stemming from that. These infringements on Allen's legal rights did not stop here. Inmate companions then spread the good word of Allen's confessions to inmates in the general population at Westville, prompting these inmates to then share the information with their respective family members in the public. See the attached transcripts of Lacey Patton Jr. again and Jason Elliott. Proof of these leaks were offered up by the state in the form of audio recorded interviews and accompanying transcripts, and included in large volumes of discovery dumps received by the defense in the recent past. Let me ask you, how do you think the fucking troll farm knew what he was saying at the time he was saying these sorts of things? Because they were talking to inmates and families of inmates. That's right. Because the PR is the number one thing in this case, because they were attempting to influence the jury pool. Okay, they wanted to contaminate the jury pool, and they did so. They were out there saying that he confessed. They were out there saying it because they knew trial was coming, and they had to influence those jurors. On May 12th, 2023, Lacey Patton and Jason Elliott were interviewed by law enforcement. Oh, really? May 12th, 2023. What was happening with Richard Allen in May of 2023? You guys remember the timeline? April, May is the absolute worst of Rick Allen. You don't believe me? Oh, okay, yeah. That's when he's at the height of his psychotic episode. That's when he's eating his own shit, smearing it all over his body, stabbing his genitals with the sporks, drinking out of the toilet, throwing himself on the floor, beating the shit out of himself, trying to kill himself. April, May. Oh, okay. So in May, Allen confesses to Lacey Patton Jr. that he's sorry for molesting these two young girls and shooting them in the back. And then he does the same to Correctional Officer Michael Roberts. But it gets worse. The 14th Amendment forbids fundamental unfairness in the use of evidence, whether true or false. It's important as it is that persons who have committed crimes be convicted. There are considerations that transcend the questions of guilt or innocence. Thus, in cases involving involuntary confessions, this court enforces the strongly felt attitude of our society that important human values are sacrificed where agency of the government in the course of securing a conviction wrings a confession out of an accused against his will. This insistence upon putting the government to the task of proving guilt by means other than inquisition was engendered by historical abuses, which we are all quite familiar. The truth or falsity of Allen's statements are of no consequence to this analysis. Allen has been treated unlike any other pretrial detainee in Indiana history. This methodology employed by the justice system is one of a first impression, and therefore the circumstances created by this methodology should not be a part of any consideration of Allen's guilt or innocence. The system of pretrial detention employed against Allen runs afoul of the Fifth and Sixth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution and Article 1, Section 14 of the Indiana Constitution. Okay? And look at what do we have here? What do we have here? Can everyone see this? Hello? Hold on. It's time to be annoying. Just a moment. I have to say this. Hello?
Oh my God!
Hello?
Bruh.
What is this? List of exhibits. Oh, wow. Wow. You know, because this is interesting. Because try as I might, I try my damnedest, I could not find this shit right here. That's right. You know what this tells me? This is something they don't want the world to see. Oh, well, what do we have here? Let's go backwards. Statement of inmate Jason Elliott. Hey, that name sounds familiar. Sounds like what I just read. Statement of inmate Lacey Patton Jr. Oh, you know what? Sounds like something I just read. Lacey Patton Jr. Isn't that the guy who said that Rick told him that he molested the girls and shot them in the back? Yeah. Question, guilters. Were either of those girls shot in the back? So if neither girl was shot in the back or molested by Rick Allen, then how? You can't have it both ways. Because either he's confessing to shit that's real, that he knows what he's talking about, like shooting these girls in the back, or he's just flailing around in his mental firings. And he's just throwing shit out there. And remember, he's being fed shit by Monica Walla. He's being fed shit by these inmates. It's a two-way street. Communication is always a two-way street, is it not? That's what communication is. You can't communicate if it's a one-way street. Inmates, two-way street. Monica Walla, two-way street. Inmates talking to their relatives, two-way street. Correctional officers, two-way street. You see what I'm getting at? So Rick Allen is not just outputting information. He's receiving information. And it's a two-way street. It's a game of telephone. He shot the girls in the back. He's sorry he molested them and shot them in the back. He's sorry he killed his grandkids. He's sorry he did this. He's sorry he molested his daughter. All this shit that never happened. But Monica Walla's not going to sit there and say, oh, you didn't see a van, did you? And that's the gotcha moment. I want to know where this shit is. Where's number 15 and 16 here? Statement of Lacey Patton Jr. And Lacey said what again? Wait. I can't remember correctly because I'm not that smart because I'm just on YouTube. Let's see. Lacey said here. You see, I've searched his name in the search bar. You see, Lacey said here. On one occasion, Allen confessed to molesting, and this is a quotation from the transcribed statement of Lacey Patton Jr. The quotation from the transcribed statement says, Allen confessed to molesting those two young girls and shooting them in the back. Girls weren't shot in the back, so do you see the point I'm trying to make here? But how do I know this was important? Well, here's how. What is this? Oh, look at here. Look at here. Almost a year later. Almost a fucking year later. What does this say? What does this say? Subpoena to Lacey Patton Jr., inmate. Oh, a year later, just about, Brad Rossi subpoenas Lacey Patton Jr., and it says, you are hereby commanded to appear for deposition with regard to the state of Indiana v. Richard Allen. Interesting. What else is here? Oh, look at there. Another subpoena. Lacey Patton Jr. Brad Rossi. You are hereby commanded to appear for jury trial. State of Indiana versus Richard Allen. And what else? Lacey Patton Jr. Dear Mr. Patton Jr., please accept this letter as confirmation that I have enclosed two separate subpoenas. The first requires you to appear in the Elkhart County Jail on Friday, April 26, 2024 at 1 p.m. At that time, I will take your deposition via electronic platform. Special Prosecutor James Luttrell, myself, and court reporter Sharon Barrett will participate in the deposition, all through electronic means. The intention is to question you regarding your contact with Richard Allen while the two of you were incarcerated in the Westville Correctional Facility. I have enclosed a copy of the transcript from your interview last year for your review in anticipation of your deposition. Additionally, I have enclosed a subpoena requiring you to appear at the jury trial in this cause. You are scheduled for May 20th, 2024 at 8 a.m. I've also enclosed a letter that we are providing to all subpoenaed witnesses explaining the scheduling challenges with regard to your transport. No, I'm sorry, with regard to this trial. Naturally, because you're in jail, I will likely have to seek a court order requiring your transport. Either way, I'm enclosing the subpoena for your records. Yeah, interesting. Why isn't any of this in any of the appellate exhibits or filings? Why can't I find any of this shit? Oh, another one. What is this? Dear Mr. Patton Jr., Lacey Patton Jr., inmate, April 19, 2024. Dear Mr. Patton Jr., please accept this letter as confirmation that you have received a subpoena from Richard Allen's defense team to appear in Carroll County Circuit Court to provide testimony in State v. Richard Allen. From a scheduling standpoint, this case poses some significant challenges. The state will present its case first. The defense will follow thereafter. It's difficult to estimate the length of time that it will take the state of Indiana to present its case, and therefore, by extension, it's difficult for Richard Allen's defense team to anticipate the exact date and time upon which any particular witness would be required to appear. So you see? Oh, okay. So this is, are you telling me this is another defense witness and defense strategy that just didn't play out because the defense just threw in the towel and gave up? Because they were overly confident and cocky? Oh, what is this? What is it? Oh, so it's not all bullshit. Transcriber's certificate. Okay, certificate. I, Gail M. Armstrong, Notary Public for State of Indiana, do hereby certify the above within the foregoing is a true, full, complete, correct transcript of a statement of Lacey Patton Jr., taken at Westville Correctional Facility on Friday, May 12th, 2023. Wait up. When did Richard Allen enter this psychosis? April, May? This said statement was recorded by means of a digital audio recording device, and later, May 30th, 2023, Steve Mullen, Carroll County Prosecutor's Office, delivered the recording to me and requested I transcribe the statement, which I reduced to print. But like I said, you might be able to find it, but try as I might and reach out to multiple parties who usually can get anything we need. No one can find this statement. But like I said, what we do have is the reference to this statement, which states that Rick said he shot the girls in the back, shooting them in the back. See attached transcribed statement. So what's going on here? Let me pull this up. That ain't it. Sorry about that. I got context. Okay. So let's establish some more context. April 11th, 2023. Now, guys, I ask you, I've reiterated many times how important this timeline is. April, May 2023. Look at it. April 11th, 2023. The very height of Rick's psychotic episode. Let's see what Robert Baston had to say. I'm only going to really read selected excerpts from this. Robert Baston says, I'm an inmate at Westville Correctional Facility in the same unit that Richard Allen is in. Richard Allen is being abused and mistreated. GITMO, okay? Along with other inmates in Westville Control Unit, restrictive housing. There are corrupt officers and ranking officers calling Richard Allen a kid killer. Wait up. Are you telling me the officers? So this ain't other inmates. He starts by saying there are corrupt officers and ranking officers calling Richard Allen a kid killer, teasing him that he has a visit from his family. The phone is ringing on his tablet. Inmates in cells A1102, Logan Osborne, A2207, inmate Riley, inmate cell A2204 and A2205 are threatening to kill Richard Allen. Threatening to kill Richard Allen. Okay, calling him a kid killer are the corrections officers, and the other inmates, how many are that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Threatening to kill Richard Allen, telling him to kill himself. And these inmates have made these comments in front of Warden who? John Gallipo? So the officers and inmates are threatening to kill Richard Allen in front of Warden John Gallipo, in front of other ranking officers and officers. The staff has recorded on camera these inmates making the threats and suggestions that he kill himself. And he has done nothing to stop it. This is the same week that Richard Allen is confessing to killing these kids. They're threatening to kill him and telling him to kill himself. And Gallipo is witnessing this. Has everyone forgotten about these statements, or is it more understandable now that it's in context of all we just read through? Months later, I used to be in a cell just above defendant Richard Allen. And as soon as I started voicing my opinion and advocating the abuse, mistreatment, and inhumane conditions of Richard Allen, myself, and other inmates, in April of 2023, and recording times and dates of incidents, the corrupt Westville Correctional Facility warden John Gallipo, corrupt custody supervisor Chad Corinth, Westville Restrictive Housing Unit Captain Gary Lewis, and manager Miss Tracy Cornett retaliated on me approximately April 29th, or maybe it's 24th, 2023, and had me moved from APOD away from defendant Richard Allen. And then on May 4th, 2023, corrupt Lieutenant Larry Crittenden places me on strip cell status. Does that sound familiar? And corrupt Sergeant Robinson and Officer Garu and Officer, yeah, I've heard of this Robinson before. Isn't he one of the Odin patches? And Officer Pleasant remove all of my property from my cell so I could not write or record dates and times of incidents, and went through my property to destroy any incriminating dates and times that I had recorded. Sure. Are we going to just forget about this? The next morning, May 5th of 2023, approximately 7 a.m. Remember, Rick Allen is still confessing, right? April, May. Rick Allen is still in this depths of his psychosis. May 5th, I was placed in full trip gear restraints with handcuffs, black box, belly chain, leg shackles on security camera, and corrupt Sergeant Brandon Williams and officers removed me from the holding cell to escort me back to my assigned cell. And Sergeant Brandon Williams orders one of his corrupt officers to run my mattress and bedding through the urine on the floor of the cell, since I was left in a cell overnight with no running water or toilet. Then corrupt Sergeant Brandon Williams, who has a lawsuit on him in the U.S. Northern District of Indiana for assaulting an inmate and denying the inmate medical treatment for his injuries, can be seen on security camera slamming me to the floor while in full trip gear restraints, and remember, with the shock vest and all this other shit on, and violently twisting my foot and ankle until they break, and then intimidating the nurse not to treat my injuries of a broken foot and ankle, and a stab wound to my elbow all the way to the bone that was bleeding badly from an ink pen sticking out of Sergeant Brandon Williams' stab vest. And I was then taken back to my assigned cell, B202. Then at approximately 10:45 a.m., corrupt Sergeant Brandon Williams returns to my cell, and with no verbal command to come to my cell door and no video camera recording, Sergeant Brandon Williams opens the handcuff port door in cell and sprays me with pepper spray, OC pepper spray, while I was laying in a bed suffering from my injuries earlier that morning. Then the corrupt Sergeant Brandon Williams leaves me in the cell asphyxiating for approximately 10 minutes before removing me from the cell. Sergeant Brandon Williams, former officer, and Sergeant Motts, Officer Sergeant Clements, and an unknown officer take me out of view of security cameras in the hallway, and Officer Quentin Davis tells Sergeant Brandon Williams to hold me up while Officer Quentin Davis violently punches me in the ribs and stomach, breaking my ribs, and former officer Sergeant Motts kneed me in the face while corrupt Westville Correctional Facility warden John Gallipo, mental health doctor Monica Walla, and Miss Bourne watched the fucking beatdown. Still think it's all bullshit and this is a joke? In May of 2023, right after the excessive use of force assault with bodily injury, attorney Brad Rozzi, the attorney for Richard Allen, requested an interview with me concerning the poor treatment of Richard Allen and other inmates at Westville Restrictive Housing Unit and the inhumane and human and civil rights violations. And someone at either IDOC or Warden John Gallipo denied that interview because they did not want attorney Brad Rozzi to see and record my injuries that they were trying to cover up. I remained in a cell for over a month suffering from my injuries before I received medical treatment after being taken off strip cell and receiving my property back and contacting the state of Indiana Governor's Office of Ombudsman Bureau, who contacted the IDOC Office of Investigation and Intelligence, who then got me medical treatment for only, quote unquote, my broken foot and ankle, where x-rays confirmed my foot and ankle were broken after a month. While being interviewed by attorney Bradley Rozzi on August 4th, 2023, Corrupt Sergeant Dahlia went to my cell and took all of the incriminating notes and times that I had recorded. There needs to be a disbanding of the corrupt IDOC Office of Investigation and Intelligence and state and federal investigations into the corruption going on and the inhumane conditions, human and civil rights violations due to the corrupt staff and officers shortages going on in all IDOC facilities that are creating unsafe and dangerous prison conditions. On November 8, 2023, an inmate at Westville Correctional Facility was murdered. Approximately in June 2023, an inmate died of starvation in Westville Restrictive Housing Unit. Inmates have died of suicide in IDOC because of the corruption. Westville Restrictive Housing Unit custody staff say that they are about inmates' quality of life, but I have not had a shower since October 2nd of 2023. And there's other inmates who have not showered longer than I, because inmates do not want a shower when officers are leaving them locked in a triangle shower for hours with no place to sit down and having to stand because of short-staffed or officers sleeping in the control booths. Not had a shower since October 2nd of 2023. This letter was written November 23rd. That's a month and 20 days. The corrupt Westville Correctional Warden, John Gallipo, does not allow Christian Amish group called Christmas Behind Bars to pass out Christmas snacks to inmates because Gallipo's the leader of a pagan white nationalist group called Odin. The corrupt staff and officers at Westville and other IDOC facilities wear Odin and Punisher patches on their uniforms and stab vests. The corrupt staff and officers that wear the Punisher patches is a group of good old boys that assault and torture and abuse, mistreat inmates. When I was in a cell just above defendant Richard Allen, I witnessed officers taunting him, calling him a baby killer, kid killer. Officers taunting him, calling him a baby killer, a kid killer, and deliberately slamming the shower door next to Richard Allen's cell to either wake him up or just to annoy him. I also witnessed other abuses and mistreatment to Richard Allen. There are dozens of lawsuits on staff and officers at Westville Restrictive Housing Unit in the U.S. Northern District Court of Indiana that clearly show a pattern of assault, torture, abuse, and mistreatment on inmates by corrupt staff and officers. The IDOC corrections officers seems to And the IDOC seems to put their corrupt staff and officers in their restrictive housing units, that actually assault, torture, and abuse and mistreat inmates. In other words, he's saying they put the corrupt officers specifically in a restrictive housing unit where they put Rick Allen. Okay, you get what I'm saying? I want to go into this affidavit of Max Baker. Little Max Baker, 20 years old. Legal assistant to Brad Rozzi. A great deal of my time working on this case involved me reviewing hours upon hours of video from inside the walls of maximum security unit where Rick has been confined. Through my work, I've discovered a video of Rick taken by a prison working carrying a camcorder, which shows Rick being moved into the captain's office. Rick has no shirt on. He's fully shackled. He's seated in the room with the cameras pointing directly at his face. His face is severely blackened, blued, and bruised to the point where it is obvious that his face suffered some extreme trauma. This video was taken between May 26th and May 30th, 2023. The video is 4 minutes and 5 seconds in length. It was so disturbing to me that I took a still shot of the video at approximately 32 seconds and offered it up to Attorney Rozzi for his review. During the course of my employment with Attorney Rozzi, I visited with Richard Allen at Westville Correctional Facility on a handful of occasions, specifically on December 12th, 2022, May 4th, 2023, May 30th, 2023, and August 4th, 2023, August 17th, 2023. During my visits with Richard Allen at Westville, I became familiar with two prison guards who frequently happened to transport Richard Allen to and from his visits, Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson. I observed Sergeant Robinson on more than one occasion, in his prison uniform wear patches that read, "In Odin we trust and I hate people." Sergeant Robinson also routinely wore a patch that included 3 interlocking triangles, half-dissected American flag. On more than one occasion, I observed Sergeant Jones bearing patches on his prison uniform reading, "In Odin we trust," and 3 interlocking triangles. On May 30th, 2023, I participated in a visit with Attorney Rozzi and Richard Allen's wife, Kathy Allen. The visit took place in a public visitation center. Richard Allen was escorted by Sergeant Jones and Robinson. During the visit, Sergeant Robinson stood on a post just a few feet away from Richard Allen and his wife as they sat in the middle of the room on opposite sides of a table. At all times, Sergeant Robinson was within earshot of Richard Allen and his wife. The room was entirely empty with the exception of Jones and Robinson and a few other prison employees. On one occasion, during the visit, Richard Allen requested some water. He was given none. On a second occasion, he requested a drink of water for his grieving wife. She was given none. The water fountain was no more than 15 feet from the two of them. There was no privacy afforded Richard Allen or his wife. During the same visit, Sergeant Jones stood on the post opposite end of the table, slightly further away than Robinson. During visits on May 4th, 2023, May 30th, 2023, prison officials videotaped the entirety of the visits. Robinson, Jones, and others would man the camcorder. Defendant Allen was required to sit in the middle of the room in a plastic chair facing the window leading to the hallway. On the outside of the window stood a prison guard with a camcorder focused directly on Richard Allen's face. The distance between the camcorder and Richard was no more than 10 feet. The camcorder was on. During the one memorable visit, now this is where you listen, please. This is the reason I'm reading this, essentially. Okay? This is the very most important part. As a matter of fact, I'm going to shrink it, and I'm going to talk to you directly. During one memorable visit, which was May 4th, 2023, remember, this is at the absolute height of his psychosis. Myself, Attorney Baldwin, Attorney Rozzi met with Rick Allen to discuss matters involving the case. At this time, Richard Allen was in a mental and physical state of deterioration and was nearly non-communicative. Listen to this. During the visit, Richard Allen repeatedly asked whether or not his wife was okay and if his family was okay. He also claimed on a couple of occasions that they were going to kill him. When asked who he was referring to as they, Richard Allen responded saying, the guys with the Odin patches. Up to this point in the legal process, Richard Allen's defense team had never mentioned Odinites or Odinism to Richard Allen either directly or indirectly. The first time I'm aware of any mention of that involving Richard Allen was during the visit on August 25th, 2023, when Kathy Allen attended. A discussion occurred between attorneys and client regarding the Odinite ties to the crime scene. Here's a question. Is my wife okay? Is my family okay? Is my wife alive? Is my family alive? They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me. Who's they? The guards. Max Baker, 14 September 2023. Remember what we just read from Robert Baston? The staff and officers in the presence of Monica Walla and John Gallipo are threatening to kill Richard Allen, calling him a baby killer. They're beating the shit out of Baston for snitching. Okay, why do you think Baston got the beat down? Okay, why did he get strip cell, suicide watch, in a room with no toilet, no water? Why do you think they beat him down? Why do you think they broke his foot and ankle? Why do you think he got the punishment? Because he's snitching that they're threatening to kill Richard Allen, telling him to kill himself, calling him a kid killer, a baby killer. In the presence of John Gallipo, in the presence of Monica Walla, is it any wonder why Rick Allen would be saying, is my wife alive? Is my wife okay? They're going to kill me. And then at trial, you had Dr. John Martin. Dr. John Martin was a state's witness. How are you familiar with Richard Allen? He was my patient at Westville Correction Center from November of 22 to November of 23 for a year. During all of this bad shit, this was Rick's psychiatrist. Psychiatric service is what he was providing during the absolute worst of all this. Now, pretty interesting here. He says, I completed my training through University of Miami, Florida, Jacksonville Memorial Hospital, VA Medical Center, Miami, Florida. Did you become a licensed psychiatrist in the state of Florida? Yes, I did. Did you become a licensed psychiatrist in the state of Indiana? Yes, I'm licensed in 3 states. Now, this is interesting. Florida, Indiana, and Illinois. Florida, Indiana, and Illinois. When did you begin to work with IDOC? Oh, interesting. 2020. sometime in 2020. My first full-time job, listen, after completing training, my first full-time job was in the Palm Beach County Jail in Florida. I've worked throughout in corrections since 1983. I like to work a lot. I probably have the equivalent between 40 and 45 years of correctional psychiatric care. I've worked in at least 5 different jails in Florida. I worked in several prisons in Florida. I've worked female prisons, male prisons, reception centers, permanent camps. I've also visited about 16 major prisons in Florida while working to resolve a big lawsuit from '72 related to the provision of psychiatric services. So from 7 of 2020, when I started in Indiana State Prison, I was working 40 hours a week. I started working an additional 20 in Joliet with the Illinois Department of Corrections. Boy, 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 this is rich. The tentacles run deep, deep. I started working in Westville. Did you establish at Westville? No, I had an office at Westville. It was in one building, in another building, a very secure facility within Westville. There was a very secure building called Westville Correctional Unit where Rick was, obviously. That's where Mr. Allen was housed. He was transferred as a safekeeper because it was felt he was in danger in county jail. All right. Now we're going to forward a bit, okay? I think I want page 10 is what I'm thinking. No, it's not. It's going to be right after that. Let's see. Now, you made reference to Allen being a safekeeper, is that correct? Yeah. And that's a reference to someone being in solitary confinement. Are you familiar with that reference? Yes, I am. Based on your experience with your work in the prison systems, what's the difference between a safekeeper and someone in solitary? Yeah, my understanding is a person is sometimes transferred to prison for his safekeeping because it's thought that he's not safe in a local county jail. For his protection, he's being transferred. They're known as safekeepers. Do you have experience other than with Mr. Allen as a safekeeper in a prison setting? I've treated safekeepers in general population, but Mr. Allen was in what could be referred to as solitary confinement, but can also be referred to as one-man cell. I just want to explain why I talk about one-man cell rather than solitary confinement is because it's the same room. The person who is put in solitary confinement, it has punitive connotations. Even he knows it's punitive. That the person has done something wrong in prison. He has broken some rule or regulation. He's being punished by isolating him from other people for a certain period of time, depending on the charges, whatever rule he's broke. So he gets the time and he's locked in. Whereas Mr. Allen had not done anything wrong in the prison system. He had not broken any rule or regulation. This is state witness. Yet, he's being treated as though he had done something wrong in the prison. And, that's how he must have felt, Again, this is state's witness. He's treated as he's done something wrong. He must have felt he's done something wrong. And in a way, that was not right. That was not right. But at the same time, we are to look at the other responsibility in the prison system had to keep him safe, to keep him alive. And so even though there's a risk of serious harm to his mental health by putting him in solitary confinement, the mission or the need to keep him alive was the overriding decision. are you familiar with someone being in solitary? Yes, almost all the prisons I've worked in have been, high security prisons that we'd have a lot of people in solitary confinement. As a matter of fact, for a whole year, I was in charge of a program supervising 5 prisons, including one for women, where we had all the people who are in solitary across the state of Florida all brought to these 5 prisons. What? This guy's is a specialist. He's pre-positioned in 2020? I was in charge of a program supervising 5 prisons where we had all the people who were in solitary confinement across the state of Florida. So by comparison, were you familiar with things that Mr. Allen had available to him in order to differentiate safekeeping from solitary confinement in order to provide contact with others? Well, we did a lot of meetings with the warden, the head of service administrator, the psychologist for the DOC, the lawyer for the DOC, and of course the warden and assistant warden to see what we could all do to make life a little bit more comfortable for him in prison, like giving him access to a tablet, TV, recreation, phone calls, as much as could be done. So were you aware that he had suicide companions at his door? Yeah. There were times when he had expressed suicidal thinking. We call that suicidal ideations. There were times when he actually did something to hurt himself. So during the periods of time he would have kept on suicide watch, he'd be given a suicide gown and he'll be given a suicide blanket. He would have no sheets with which he could try to hang himself. We're going to forward a bit. Oop. Okay. Initial evaluation. First time I saw him was on the 8th of November, 2022. He had recently come from reception center, and I had, or Sunday earlier, I had reviewed what had been written in the reception center on him. So when I saw him, I asked him a few more questions to add to the database to do a mental status exam. At that point in time, when I saw him, he was stable. There was no problems I could see in November 2022. He had a history of depression, but he did not seem to be depressed. He had a history of anxiety, but did not seem to show any signs or symptoms of anxiety. So I continued on him on his medication. That was the first time I saw him. The next time I saw him was 3 weeks later, on the 29th of November. Again, everything seemed fine. He didn't seem to have any problems. Next time I saw him on January, I think 29th. No, the 24th of January. At that time I saw him, I said, I need to sign consent for medication because usually we try to get consent signed once a year, and I want to make sure he had signed it. And if I may be allowed to digress a little, informed consent is something that's really important for us. Now, normally when a patient goes to see a doctor and he's got some infection, the doctor might write a prescription for an antibiotic that the patient goes and feels that that's okay. But for mental health patients, anytime a psychiatrist is writing a prescription, he first gets informed consent form signed. Okay. So this is the 24th of January. Okay. And so you saw him in January 24th. Would that be normal time frame between you and your next visit with Alan? So he was doing well. According to our protocol, I was allowed to see him once every 6 months or even once every 3 months, but we extended it to once every 6. So I was supposed to see him sometime in April, maybe April 24th, when I was likely to see him. Okay. And then did you see him in April? Yes, I did. Was it regularly scheduled or different? No, it was not. I got a phone call from his health service administrator, Miss Bridegroom. What? Bridegroom? And without telling us what she said, did you call her prompt you to go? Did her call prompt you to go see Alan? Yes. It was not planned. And as we talk about this, I want you to provide information to us based on your own observations, not necessarily information from others. Okay. So when you see Mr. Allen was on April 13th, you said? Yes. Remember, April 13th, he's at the height of his psychosis. What did you observe, Mr. Allen, during your visit? So I'm going to read from my notes. So when I went to Westville that day, I was met with the warden and other people, and I was able to look into the cell in which the patient, Mr. Allen, was housed. He was lying naked on a mattress. Okay. Then there's some back and forth, but he was naked. He had feces smeared on him. There was some brownish fluid from his mouth, and I was told that he had been eating feces. But what I saw was that he was naked, and I saw the brown fluid coming out of his mouth, and he had feces smeared on himself. And I said, I need to talk to him. So what they did was the officers practically carried him to a shower stall, and they hosed him down so he could be cleaned up. And they gave him a new suicide gown, and then they brought him to the nurse's office, which is very close. It was a large room, which is mostly a storage room. Based on your observations of Mr. Allen, did you draw a conclusion about his mental health? Yes. And this was, what was your conclusion? The presentation was different. My conclusion at that point was that he was psychotic. He was psychotic.
Oh my God!
All right. How did that impact your treatment of Mr. Allen from a medical standpoint? Okay. In order to treat the psychosis, I had to give him an antipsychotic. But in the process of interviewing him, I was looking for two things. Like I said before, we get informed consent form signed by the patient. So in this case, I was looking for two things, insight and judgment. Now, when I talk about insight, what I mean is, does a person have a fair understanding of the reality of the situation? When I say judgment, I mean, can he make the right decision? In both cases, I found that his insight was deficient and his judgment was impaired. What? Oh, but he's faking his confessions are legit, and he's faking the psychosis. Somebody make it make sense. Somebody make this part make sense. And this is very serious. I know you guys are fucking distracted. It's hard to keep up with. It's hard. It's like being in a boring class for 3 hours. Trust me, I went to college. It was very fucking excruciating. But this is the meat. This is where you do pay attention. So the doctor who is supervising this situation, let's back it up and look at the date, because I am trying to express to you what's important here. April 13th. He's eating shit, smeared and covered in shit. He's declared to be psychotic. And what does this state from this state's witness, this state actor? The question is, line 22, I found his insight deficient, judgment impaired. Line number 8 and 9. My conclusion was he was psychotic, insight deficient, judgment impaired. And then they go into the injecting for Haldol. I'm not going through all of this with you. I'm just trying to make some really rudimentary points here. Okay? So you see here that they're given psychotropic medication. Okay? You're seeing from the state's perspective, they're dosing the Haldol. He specifically spells it all out. This is all here for you to go learn about if you care. Okay, he specifically is giving the dosages, the dates, everything. He's absolutely spelling out the medical regimen here. Okay, so this is all that. But let's go here. Let's see. Oh my God, where is it? Now listen, April 13th, height of his psychosis, hallucinations, responding and talking to voices that weren't there. He's hearing in his head. Okay. Suicidal. May 2nd. Still dosing him. They're dosing. May 30th. Coming out of it. Okay. So all of this is there for you. I'm not gonna go through too much of it, but I did want to just touch a little bit on the cross exam. So this is Razi's cross exam, and again, let's dabble into this here. Okay, right? Check this out. He says, "You have many different jobs." Yes. Okay, and those jobs involved working at different counties, right? Like Broward County, Palm Beach County, Baker, yes, sir, and involved in different facilities in those counties. That's right. And you're terminated from a job in Florida, yeah. And you were involved in some lawsuits surrounded around individuals who were solitarily confined when you were in Florida? No. You were testifying about earlier when Miss Diener was asking you, were you not? The Osterbeck case? Yes. The case involves solitary confinement. Yes. Judge, sidebar. She freak out. Remember, Diener always pulls the same as McLean. They freak out when the shit gets deep. Okay. So they want to shut Razi up about this line of questioning. And they do. Now, I took your deposition in October of this year. Is that correct? Yes. And you were acknowledging that it was challenging to treat someone in solitary, right? Yes. And in 2022, you were asked to go down to Westville. You were working at the state prison in Michigan City. Is that right? Correct. Yes.
Oh my God!
Motherfucker.
Bruh.
Anyone else? And in 2022, you were assigned to Westville. You were asked to go to Westville in 2022 from Michigan City in the state prison. Yes. Do y'all understand? Anyhow, it goes on, and you can see what's happening there. Now I'm going to go to something else. This is Dr. Stuart Gracian. Okay, Dr. Stuart Gracian. Let me back it up one page. Pretty interesting here. Matter of fact, back up a little bit more. All right. So, of course, like I said, this Diener, okay, this bitch, she does the same temper tantrum or hissy fits. She throws the same hissy fits that McClellan throws. Oh, object, sidebar. Okay. Which is what they're in the midst of here, but you'll see why. So he says he's not going to talk about facts of the case. He can't testify to the effects of solitary confinement or psychoanalytic thought, blah, 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 but we're staying away from testify about Allen said if it's confession, Okay. Oh, but even if he knows what the charges are, he can't say he made a statement. Razi says, I don't understand how he can't testify to something that we all know is patently false. That's for the jury to decide. Okay, but here we get to it. Okay. Razi says, well, the fact that the girls weren't shot. Hello? The fact that the girls weren't shot. Oh, my God. Is patently false, right? Well, yes. So I don't know how you're going to parse those things out. I'm trying to get this right. I'll tell you. I'll get to the scientific stuff. Yeah, get to the science. All right. So Dr. Grazian, let's talk about solitary confinement. That's what you're here to talk about. Tell the jury, explain to the jury what the phrase even means in a clinical sense or in a professional sense. Well, basically, solitary confinement is the confinement of an individual in a small cell, roughly 80 or 90 square feet, with minimal opportunities for perceptual stimulation. There's very limited opportunities for any kind of meaningful social interaction, no real opportunities for occupational stimulation. So it's an enormously lonely, helpless environment and is very toxic to mental functioning. People cannot function for any extended period of time with continuing inadequate levels of stimulation. They can't maintain an adequate state of alertness. And in the worst cases, of course, in the most severe cases, they become psychotically delirious, confused, disoriented, engaging in really regressed, bizarre kinds of behavior like I believe folks have seen here in these videos. When you reviewed those videos, did you find the conditions that Mr. Allen was enduring as meeting those conditions that you had just associated with solitary confinement? Totally. Okay. He was in a small cell, very barren, had very little to do except read the Bible. He was laying on a mattress on the floor. There were sometimes mice droppings. I visited so many that it doesn't seem, unfortunately, all that is similar to others facilities I have seen. All right. So we're going to move into this one. Let's see. So you told us about some of the symptoms of solitary confinement. Would you briefly identify those for the jury? Well, in the most severe cases, people become overly delirious or overtly delirious. They become disoriented, confused. Their memory for events disappears very typically. In fact, when a person recovers from delirium, one of the frightening things they experience is they have no memory for what happened during the period of time that they were delirious, which lines up with Rick Allen saying he doesn't even remember the confessing because it was in the midst of delirium. Their behavior regresses to a point that is kind of really grotesque. Smearing feces, unfortunately, is one of the more common things that happen to people in delirium. Rick is smearing feces. How does he know to fake that? Do you think Rick has read books on the effects of solitary confinement and symptoms of delirium that you should probably spread feces over yourself? And you think he's so committed that he's going to eat some too? Smearing feces, unfortunately, is one of the more common things that happen to people in delirium. But, acting out sexually, being naked, smearing themselves, throwing things all over the ground, not knowing what they're doing or where they are, that's about as bad as it gets, of course. In the context, of course, there are situations where people have seriously injured themselves or killed themselves. But, even people who tolerated solitary confinement better than that will find they have difficulties with memory, with concentration, with thinkings. They become hyper responsive to stimuli. They can't stand stimulation at all. They become obsessional, like really awful things happen. A high rate of suicide associated with solitary confinement, roughly 7 to 9 times as great as it is in general population. You mentioned the word delirium. There were questions about that earlier. Can you just tell the jury clinically what delirium is? I think you touched on that. Yeah, well, delirium is the inability to maintain an adequate state of alertness. So the person becomes mentally confused, can't think straight, can't remember things. When it really gets bad, it's like you have this huge fog or this thick soup in your head and everything just floats by and nothing makes any sense at all. It's just total bewilderment. What causes delirium? Well, it's generally caused by two factors. One is internal factors. The internal activating system is deranged. For example, people in severe sepsis, people in severe congestive heart failure, respiratory failure, other organ system failure can develop delirium. Oh, it's when you're dying. The other thing that can cause it is inadequate levels of external stimulation. So we see it in people, for example, in medical situations, eye patch patients, uh, I don't know, poliomyelitis patients in the past with iron lungs, sort of confined to these iron lungs is a major problem for them. We also have ICU psychosis, intensive care psychosis. I recently had cataract surgery, spoke with my ophthalmologist. He's really familiar with the whole problem with eye patch patients and visually impaired patients developing hallucinations, sometimes becoming overtly confused and delirious. So it was interesting that he had had experience with that. All right. So we'll move on a bit, but I wanted you to just get a little flavor of that. And he says, was there any doubt in your mind that the state existed when you heard all this with Richard Allen? Oh, absolutely is classic. No doubt in my mind. Okay, let's talk about false memories. Do you recognize that? Yes. Tell the jury. Well, in studying memory, you come to realize that many people in many circumstances develop memories that are untrue, but they experience these as being true. And I did study with one psychologist, well, actually a few, when we realized that a false memory, after it's reviewed and reviewed and reviewed by a patient, by the individual, starts looking very much like a memory. So we went back and tried to understand how the memory developed. And what we saw was that false memories don't start as images, images, real memories. They start as beliefs. So many people with a false memory will say, I think I did, or I think I saw. And after a while, they work on it. They work on it in their mind, and visual, perceptual images start to develop. In fact, you were really trying to remember something that happened a long time ago, which you actually end up remembering is the last time you thought about it. So in your memory can shift like a game of telephone. So basically, we discovered when a person starts having, or quote unquote, memory by saying, I think I remember seeing this, or I think I did this, they're not the way memories are really emerge, but it's the way false memories emerge. So remember this. I think I killed Libby and Abby. I think I did. Do you guys see the legitimate clinical symptoms that go back in these months and years with Rick Allen? How this all developed from I think I did. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I killed him. I think I killed him. Maybe I killed him. I'll tell them whatever they want to know. All right. I'm going to pull this up a little closer. They're arguing. There's a whole bunch of arguing. And let's see. Oh yeah, that was it. Okay, so yeah, that was it. I'm not going to waste much more time with that, but I'm hoping that everyone kind of can put together those things there. Now, there's one more thing I'd like to really look at before we get out of here. Okay. Here it goes. Let's see. What the hell's going on? Let's see. Come on, Prof. All right, let's see. Here we go. All right, can you guys see this? Good enough? This is Richard Allen reportedly made confessions to inmates guards attorneys say he was in a state of psychosis, April 11th, 2024. Richard Allen reportedly made incriminating statements to both inmates and guards during his time in prison, awaiting his double murder trial. His attorneys want these so-called confessions suppressed due to claiming Allen was in a state of psychosis. Allen is accused of killing 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German near the Monon High Bridge in Delphi, February 17, 2017. The high-profile murder trial is currently scheduled to begin May 13th. Previous reports have detailed how Allen reportedly admitted to killing the girls during a prison phone call to his wife, but his attorneys have repeatedly claimed Allen was under physical and mental duress at the time, and his statements couldn't be trusted true. But this wasn't the only time Allen made incriminating statements. A new filing reveals that Allen also reportedly made further confessions to guards, and you notice they're in quotations, to guards and inmates during his stay at Westville Correctional Facility. Allen's attorneys are pushing for these quote-unquote confessions to be suppressed. However, stating in their latest motion that the poor conditions Allen was kept in compounded his deteriorating mental health state. The defense attorneys said these so-called confessions were the result of psychological and mental coercion illegally directed against the defendant and therefore were involuntary. True. And here you go. Look at Rick Allen now. Allen's attorney said their client was kept on suicide watch during the majority of his stay at Westville Prison. That's absolute insanity. Kept on suicide watch the majority of his stay and exposed to some of the harshest conditions that even the most heinous of convicted offenders have not endured. One of the worst environments in the whole United States of America. It should be noted that the judge felt that Allen was being treated, quote unquote, better than most inmates. Can you fucking believe that? Oh, I watch my language. I'm not going to call her that. Can you believe it? Let's read that top line, please. It should be noted that the judge felt that Allen was being treated better than most inmates during his stay and at Westville. Look at him. Take a good look. Take a good look at him. The Carroll County Prosecutor's Office, Nick McClellan, also pushed back against claims of Allen's mental health duress by stating that Allen didn't begin acting strangely, such as eating paper and shit, until after his alleged confessions to his wife. Look at him on April 4th, okay? Look at him 2 years or a year or two before his arrest. Look at this guy. Just look at him before and look at him after. April 4th. You guys remember this photo? You guys remember this? This is the consequence or this is the result of the state of Indiana wanting to force a plea of guilty out of this guy. This is the result of the state of Indiana wanting to coerce him into signing a plea agreement to the guilty plea for the murders of Abby and Libby. The entire point of what you're seeing here was, let's force this motherfucker to plead guilty, and we never have to take this to trial. That's what you get. Allen's attorneys go on to claim that inmates were stationed outside Allen's door to spy on him. They were, and keep logs of all his actions every 5 minutes, statements and behaviors, and et cetera, et cetera. Yes. The attorneys say at some point these prisoners were pulled and replaced by guards. Yeah, like I said, because it was discovered they were calling all their families, and all the leaks were getting out of all these confessions that the troll farm was coming back to YouTube and repeating. The allegedly poor conditions he was kept in exacerbated Allen's mental health conditions, according to his attorneys. According to them, Allen battled depression throughout most of his adult life, but during his stay in prison, the attorneys claimed Allen medications were administered in a less than consistent fashion. Okay? Due to all of the compounding factors, Allen's attorneys argue that any confessions their client made were not voluntary due to the toll his captivity has had on his mental health. Already suffering from a bona fide mental health disorder, and then having been cut off from moral support of his wife, mother, and daughter, and of course they were threatening to kill them all, Allen was weakened to the point where he slipped into a state of deep psychosis, plagued with grossly disorganized, delusional, paranoid, and highly dysfunctional behavior. These behaviors were manifested through verbal confessions that he may have been drugged. Yes, he said, I may have been drugged. Verbal confessions to double homicide inconsistent with known facts about the crime scene. Periods of not sleeping for days. Paranoia. Stripping off his clothes, drinking toilet water, covering himself with and eating his own feces, and many other socially unacceptable behavior. Brad Rossi. According to Allen's attorneys, one of these reported confessions includes Allen telling an inmate that he molested Abby and Libby before shooting them in the back. The attorneys point out how this isn't supported by the autopsy of the victims. The girl's cause of death is being related to a sharp object to the neck, not any gunshot wounds. Allen also reportedly expressed sorrow to another inmate over, quote unquote, molesting Abby, Libby, and others who he specifically named. Again, the attorneys point out that the alleged falsities of this confession exist by stating that the autopsy of the girls contained absence of any evidence that either of the girls were sexually assaulted near or during or before their deaths. And then here comes the ridiculous optimism. If Special Judge Fran Goll approves the motion, any so-called confessions made by Allen during his time in prison would not be able to be presented as evidence during trial. Oh my God. Bruh. What do you think she did? Bruh.
I'm legally blind.
Sorry, I have my chocolate. All right. That's better. Let's see. Sorry about that. I'm trying to manage here. A little chocolate distraction going on. All right. Now let's see. Guys, I'm asking you, please support my goal right now. I got a goal of 5 super chats. Please hit up the goal. I've got a goal of 10. We got 5. So my goal right now, before we get out of here, let's do 5 more super chats. We'll be out of here. We're going to shut it down. I think I'm about to the end of my road, but please support the channel. Let me reach my goal tonight and let the fireworks go off in the chat. We'll get our goal of 10 super chats for the night. But I do appreciate you being here. I think you all get the point of this show. Remember, this was the Gitmo treatment of Richard Allen. Let me bring this up because I just like to put it in your faces, and in particular, put this in the bloodlusters' faces. Okay, let's get this in the bloodlusters' faces. Let's see. Let's see what we can do here. Come on, bloodlusters, suck on this. There we go. There we go. So this is the Gitmo treatment of Richard M. Allen regarding the alleged confessions of a United States veteran who was coerced by torture. This is the Gitmo treatment, the Guantanamo Bay treatment, the waterboarding of Richard Allen. And I hope that you all really listened to the entirety of what I had to say tonight, and not only what I had to say, but what all the attorneys and the doctors and the inmates and the guards and what everyone had to say tonight, because I was truly, what I said tonight was a reflection of all of these individuals. And so this is not me saying it. This is not me saying it. This right here is everyone who had their hands in this. This is everyone giving their different perspective. And I think by displaying all of this to you and showing you all of this relevant information, firsthand witnesses and experts, involved parties, you can get a very clear picture of what actually happened. And what happened was the virtual waterboarding of Richard Allen in Westville. And I think it should be very clear to you as to what happened, because we just went through 3 hours of spot on, true, documented, relevant information to help you understand very clearly and to help you argue very clearly. When you're out there in the public sphere, like I said before, when you go to discuss this, I want you to know what actually happened so that you can speak to it in your interactions with others, because there are many out there who've bought the propaganda and the talking points. He confessed 61 times. There's so many people who bought that shit. And so it's up to people like you to go in there and correct people when people have said, or when people will say, he confessed 61 times. You have to be able to bring it all the way back around and bring things back down to earth and use this information that we discussed tonight to give them the proper perspective about these confessions. And so that's why it was my goal to come here tonight and cover this topic. And remember, when you take a look at this appellate's brief, it's the centerpiece of the appellate's briefs, okay? Let's pull this up temporarily. When you take a look at this appeal, okay, the centerpiece of the appeal, take a look, right? That's it. In other words, I'll show you the easiest bullet points here. Item 2. So item 1 was the search warrant, right? The illegal search, that's kind of tenuous. Item number 3 is the obstruction of presenting a defense, which we covered in the last live stream. And the centerpiece here is whether statements Allen made while gravely disabled during unprecedented pretrial solitary confinement were involuntary and the product of unconstitutional detention and therefore inadmissible. So tonight we looked at the centerpiece of the appeal, which is the torture and coercion and involuntariness of statements made during this unprecedented pretrial confinement. Remember, 13 months solitary confinement for a pretrial detainee, 7 months at a minimum of suicide watch, 30 days is the limit, according to their own policy. Judge says he's treated better than everyone else at Westville. We just heard firsthand he's treated worse. So that's your banger for tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to say hello to everybody in the chat, and I'm getting out of here. Get educated, people. This is some serious shit. Matter of fact, it's so serious that the cease and desist are flying around like confetti right now. Or should I say, they're being thrown out like party favors at Mardi Gras, okay? The cease and desist. So it's getting real out here, and it's going to get even realer. Anyhow, I want to thank Carla Ann. Hey, what up, Carla Ann? Rebecca Ann. How many fucking Anns we got in here? Carla Ann, Rebecca Ann, Mandy Boo, Four Pits, Untamable, David Rogers. Hey, Erica Morris, True Grit Crime, Nicole Watt, Swade Smith, Deb, Christina, Lisa, Silence Woman, Rebecca Ann. Everyone, thanks for the support. I asked for it. I got it. Thank you very much, Christina. Did I say Mandy Boo yet? Thank you for the support. Thank you for the amazing live chat. Fur Baby Daddy, Nancy Drew 101, Charles Godwin, our whistleblower, Troll Farm whistleblower. Who else we got in here? I'll say Four Pits about 5 more times because everyone needs to go subscribe to all of our viewers' channels. So please hit up Four Pits, hit up Victims News on Air, hit up Adrian in Light in the Dark, hit up anyone else in our chat that has a YouTube channel. Our mods are welcome to post their links down there below. Matt Payton, thank you for being here. Who else do I see here? I don't want to miss anyone. Deb. My main mod is Deb, by the way, everybody. Please give Deb a thumbs up. She's always working hard here. Thank you very much, Deb. All right. Thanks to everyone who was here. If I missed you, just say so below, okay? I'll say hi. Also, thanks to Christopher 88A, MJ Lewis 1964, Ninja Warrior Assassin. Hey, I missed you guys. What was I doing? I see Kate became a new member. Welcome, Kate. Thanks for membership. Hope you enjoy being part of the family. Critter Mama. Hey, Critter Mama. Did I miss you? How did I miss you? All right. Yeah, it's like Oprah and Delphi. You get a cease and desist. You get a cease and desist. Keep them coming, bitches. You wouldn't care if it wasn't true. Mandy Boo. Okay. All right. I think I saw everybody pretty much. Please hit the like, by the way, for all you good folks watching. It don't hurt to hit the like. I don't know if it affects the algorithm or not. Probably doesn't. But do what you got to do, okay? And especially if you're on the replay, you might be new here, but let us know. Please let us know you're here and let us know your opinion because we have been working so hard the past few years, working very diligently to open the books and put them out on the table so that you can see into the truth of all of this. And we've worked very hard at it, and we appreciate that you found us. So please, if you're new, let us know below, okay? We're working hard to do what's right and to tell the truth and to say, you cannot do this in the United States of America. You can't do it quietly and you can't do it out loud. That's why we're here. Okay, and we will continue to be here. Anyhow, I just wanted to remind everyone, hit the like, leave comments below. If you're on the replay, you can always share this. Look, this is damning information. You need to share the fact that they had this guy eating his own shit the same time they were pulling these confessions out of him, and they had a woman with perfume and purple hair and the boobs out, right? Going in there in this condition to try to groom some confessions out of him to go and feed back, who was a #1 Delphi fangirl in the universe, listening 3 hours a day, every day, to all these podcasts on the way to her work. Okay? You need to understand what's happening. And sharing this might help. Okay? If you understand the depths and the gravity of this, then share it, because this is important information. This can't be allowed to stand in the United States. It just can't. And anyhow, that's my soapbox. I'm so glad to see everyone, though. Hey, it's winter storm time, so everyone get cozy, right? Put your heaters on, put some wool socks on, get the hot chocolate, get your boo, do what you got to do, cook some nice dinners, eat some extra carbs and bread, and enjoy the winter storm, okay? That's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of my night, and I hope you enjoy the rest of yours. And if you're on the replay, you're probably going to be still in the midst of that storm. We got a few days of it. But check out all of my recent past handful of live streams. They're all important, and they're going to continue to be important, because we don't come here to play games. Okay, we come to have a good time and tell the absolute truth. This is serious. And I say it every time, because it is. All right, thank you. And with that being said, I'm out of here. Fuck the bloodlusters.
Bye bye, you fucking hoe. obsessed junkie stalker. They are the most fucking unhinged creatures on earth.
Prof is a fucking terrorist, a fucking pedophile, sympathizing fucking terrorist.
It's not productive. It's kind of gross and icky. And I feel like it tells us more about them than the people they're trying to degrade. They're always trying to degrade someone.
It was our job to help law enforcement.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
Bruh.
Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes. Can't lie, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Been waiting so patient, I'm going places, can't fake it. My heart is so cold, my energy is contagious. All the pain, I can't take it. I'm staying grounded and graceful, cause I know everything that I've been through only made me count my blessings daily. Yeah, they've been acting shady, but I don't take it personal. The memories fading, I'm enjoying the moment. I've been smelling the roses, taking time to reflect, stepping back, the truth unfolding, unfolding. Stand low, got nothing to prove, cause I'm not the blow. I've been in the booth, speaking to my soul. You know that I'm true, either way it go, way it go, either way it goes. I cannot turn cold, staying on the low. I've been protecting my soul. If your intentions are not pure, I can't let you get too close, cause I'm vibrating high. Ain't got time for your ego, these niggas quit to turn their back. Acting like the amigos, he never cared in the shows. Wasn't with you at your lows, assuming that you gonna fold. But baby, I've been growing ever since I let you go. And I've been doing better, and I know that hurts to know. Hurts to know. Only good vibes around me, and that's for sure. Only good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes. Can't lie. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. You see me searching for my inner peace. I've been learning more about myself and my purpose. Truth always come to the surface. Was hurting, but I had to heal, releasing all the pain that I always held. Been going through some changes, I'll make it still. Protecting my soul to keep it real. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. Only need good vibes. Can't lie. Only need good vibes, good vibes, good vibes, good vibes.
As an expert at being Mickey Mouse, yeah, I can say seriously, yeah, you're right, Rick. This is some Mickey Mouse bullshit.
Thanks, Mickey.
Hey, how's Donald? He's still on the stuff.
Yeah,